Chapter 22-34. Ever since Yi Lushui had obtained the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, he had been full of confidence. After half a month of planning, he had successfully lured Ji Tianqing to Yuanzhe Valley. Even though more than 30 elite martial artists had been killed, he was not discouraged. He thought that with the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, he would be invincible. He would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianqing in one fell swoop. The facts had proven that the heavenly ruler was indeed powerful. He had only used one move to severely injure Ji Tianqing. This made him even more proud. He thought that he had Ji Tianqing's life in his hands. However, the scene in front of him made him shiver. His pride and anticipation had vanished. Ji Tianqing had blocked the power of the heavenly ruler. Instead, he had severely injured Yi Lushui. This was simply too inconceivable and terrifying. Yi Lushui could not imagine how Ji Tianqing had done it. He was only a martial sage. The sword of burial of heaven in his hand was only a holy sword. It was not a heavenly sword. Yi Lushui could not figure out why this had happened. Just then, Ji Tianqing flew to him and slashed down with the sword of burial of heaven. Broken Moon Sword. The sword of burial of heaven gave off a dazzling white radiance again. It formed a white sword radiance that was 100 feet long and slashed down with divine power. The entire Yuanzhe Valley was immediately illuminated by the white radiance. Yi Lushui's face, which was covered with blood, was filled with shock and horror, which was clearly visible. Even a heavenly weapon could not kill you. I don't believe it. Yi Lushui was filled with grief and indignation. He jumped up unwillingly and slashed with the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler. The heavenly ruler lit up with a dense purple radiance and emitted a bone-chilling cold. It then slashed out a dazzling purple saber radiance. Bam! The saber radiance and the sword radiance collided and there was a deafening explosion. Both of them exploded at the same time and turned into hundreds of millions of pieces that scattered in the night sky. The raging shockwave spread out like ripples, sending Ji Tianqing and Yi Lushui flying. This time, the two of them were evenly matched. Both of them were shaken to the point that their internal organs were displaced and they spat out blood. Yi Lushui was holding the extreme Yin soul-splitting ruler, but he was not the ruler's master. He had not cultivated the technique to control the ruler, so he could not unleash the full power of the ruler. Ji Tianqing was only a martial sage and the sword of burial of heaven was only a sacred weapon. Naturally, it could not withstand the power of a sacred weapon. However, he had been constantly activating the power of the heaven-mending orb, using the sacred white light to resist the might of the divine ruler. He would not be defeated in a short period of time. However, as time went on, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. After all, the heaven-mending pearl's power had yet to recover, and it wouldn't be long before its power was exhausted. Kill! Yi Lushui shouted angrily. He held the Taiyin soul-breaking ruler and attacked again. Ji Tianqing also roared. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out a dazzling white sword light. Boom! Boom boom boom! The two of them fought in the sky above Yuanzhe Valley. Their figures split and merged, flashing in the night sky. The dazzling purple light blade and the white sword light collided. Dull thunderous sounds echoed in the night sky for thousands of miles. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, affecting everything within a radius of 2,000 miles. Yuanzhe Valley had been destroyed in the battle. It had become a deep ruin, and the ground was full of holes and cracks. Within 2,000 miles, the ground cracked and the mountains collapsed. All that could be seen was ruins. This intense battle lasted for an entire hour. The two of them had fought for tens of thousands of moves. They were like arrows at the end of their flight, and they looked miserable. Ji Tianqing could no longer maintain the celestial dragon tyrant body and returned to normal. His white robe was tattered and dyed golden with blood. There was not a single inch of his body that was intact. It was full of cracks and bloody holes. He was a bloody man. The injuries on his chest and back were the most terrifying. There were several bull-sized wounds, and his organs and ribs could be seen clearly. Most importantly, the power of the heaven-mending pearl had been exhausted, and it had become dim. Without the support of the sacred white light, he could not withstand the power of the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler. Even his soul was about to be destroyed. Yi Liushui's injuries were even more miserable than his. His white hair was dyed red with blood. His left arm was chopped off, and his body was covered with more than 70 sword wounds of various sizes. The dark red blood had already dyed him into a bloody man. His magic power was also exhausted, and his consciousness was blurred. His body was swaying, and he could collapse at any time. However, he had an obsession in his heart. With his strong willpower, he persisted. He struggled to open his bloody eyes and stared at Ji Tianqing. He grinned and said, "Ji Tianqing, you are indeed strong and monstrous enough. I have to admit that you are the most powerful enemy I have ever met in my life. Without this ruler, I would not be your opponent at all. However, the outcome will still be the same. You will still die without a doubt." Ji Tianqing also bent down and sneered at Yi Liushui. "It's good that you admit it. Without the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, you would have been torn into pieces by me. Now, both of us have exhausted our strength, and your injuries are worse than mine. I want to ask you, how are you going to kill me?" Yi Liushui raised his right hand and waved the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler. He sneered and said, "With this." As his voice fell, his right hand let go of the ruler, and his hands formed a mysterious spell, drawing arcs in front of him. As the spell was formed, the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler also lit up with dazzling light and flew into the night sky. Yi Liushui's strength had been exhausted, and he could not use the ruler to perform the secret spell. However, he still had one last trump card. That was to use the secret spell to control the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler, and let the ruler explode with the strongest power to kill Ji Tianqing. In the blink of an eye, the ruler that flew into the night sky expanded thousands of times, and became a ruler with purple light that was tens of thousands of feet long. The ruler was like a rainbow, and also like a giant sword that could split the sky. It exploded with destructive power and slashed toward Ji Tianqing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, the Taiyin soul-splitting ruler slashed out 9 huge purple sword lights, which enveloped Ji Tianqing. Soul-splitting slash. Yi Liushui shouted crazily, and his eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. The power of each soul-splitting slash was enough to split the sky and earth, and cut through all obstacles. Even if Ji Tianqing was in his best condition, he would not be able to resist the 9 soul-splitting slashes at the same time. Moreover, he was extremely weak at this moment. He was about to be hit by the soul-splitting slash and be chopped into pieces on the spot. Yi Liushui was very sure that Ji Tianqing had no chance of survival. Under the purple light, Ji Tianqing looked up at the night sky, and his face was filled with helplessness and hatred. However, he did not have the slightest hint of despair or resignation. When the soul-splitting slash was about to hit him, he suddenly stretched out his left hand, and a dazzling golden light shone in his palm. In the golden light, there was a small, exquisite pagoda the size of a palm. Swoosh! Chapter 22:35. Bam! 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 Even after a long time, the bam still lingered in the night sky. Yi Liushui stood in the night sky, covered in blood. He looked at the 9 bam. Bam! 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 He can't escape. How can he not die? Bam! 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 What did Ji Tianqing do? How did he escape from the bam? Bam! 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 The bam! Bam! The bam! 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 Ji Tianqing! Bam! 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 He! Bam! Bam! He! Bam! 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 Rage filled his heart, and a strong sense of defeat surged into his mind, making him so angry that he almost went mad. Ah! Bam! He! Bam! 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 If I don't kill you, how can I face the Divine Master? Yi Lushui shouted with a ferocious face. He grabbed the Taiyin soul-breaking ruler with his right hand and flew to the north as fast as lightning. He clearly remembered that the golden light that caused Ji Tianqing to disappear was heading north. If Ji Tianqing really teleported away, he would definitely appear somewhere in the north. At the same time, in the 5th level of 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower. Shwa! A dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the hall that was thousands of feet wide. In the middle of the hall, on the 100-meter-tall altar of the demon clan, a figure wrapped in golden light appeared out of nowhere. After the golden light faded, the figure appeared and gradually became more and more real. His clothes were ragged, and his hair was disheveled. His white robe was dyed gold, and his aura was chaotic and weak. This was Ji Tianqing. At the moment when the soul-severing slash was about to kill him, he did not hesitate to use the secret key of the pagoda. Only then did he cross 1,000,000 miles and return to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. At that time, he was already at the end of his rope. The Taiyin soul-breaking ruler was so powerful that it had sealed the space within a few hundred miles. Regardless of whether he used the Armillary Heaven secret skill or the teleportation secret skill, he would not be able to dodge the soul-severing slash. Only the small golden pagoda could break the space seal and bring him back to the pagoda to avoid the calamity. Phew! Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His body went limp as he sat on the ground, panting heavily. The ground of the altar was cold and filled with the runes of the Great Luo Divine Array. There were also 18 demon god statues around it. However, when he saw this scene, he only felt warm and safe. He closed his eyes and rested for a while before he muttered to himself, "Yi Lushui, this is the 3rd time that he has tried to assassinate me. It's a pity that he has the Taiyin soul-breaking ruler. Otherwise, I would have killed him tonight to prevent future troubles." There is a huge gap between the Sage Realm and the Immortal Realm that cannot be crossed. Even if I am invincible in the martial Sage Realm, I will not be able to withstand the power of a sacred weapon. After this, I must find a way to restore the Sword of Burial of Heaven to the Immortal Realm as soon as possible. After muttering a few words, he pulled himself together and sat cross-legged in the Great Luo Divine Array. He took out an elixir and consumed it to heal his injuries. The hall returned to silence. Ji Tianqing remained motionless for 5 days and 5 nights before he recovered 60% of his strength. Although his face was still pale and his mind was weak, he was no longer in danger. It was a pity that the power of the heaven-repairing pearl had been used up. Otherwise, he would have recovered quickly with the help of the heaven-repairing pearl's divine power. When he thought of this, his heart ached and he was furious. After a few years, the heaven-repairing pearl had finally recovered a bit of power. This time, it has been used up. Damn ye Lushui and martial god Tianju. If I don't tear you into pieces, how can I vent my anger? Ji Tianqing cursed angrily before he stood up and ended his cultivation. He looked around and stared deeply at the demon god statues and the altar beneath his feet. He could not help but fall into deep thought. Ever since I obtained the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower, I have entered it a few times and escaped death twice. However, I can only enter the first 5 levels and have not entered the 6th level yet. I wonder what is the secret of the 6th level of the Holy Pagoda. He pondered. In the past, he was only in the cross-calamity realm and could only enter the 5th level at most. Now that he was a martial sage, he should be able to try to enter the 6th level. Anyway, Yi Lushui has used up all his strength and is severely injured. He will not be able to find this place and will not dare to seek revenge at the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. Ji Tianqing thought. Since he had nothing to worry about, he would take the opportunity to try. He activated the God's Eye secret technique and his eyes turned golden. Together with his divine sense, he carefully observed the altar beneath his feet. Before he knew it, an entire day had passed. He observed the entire altar thoroughly and found many clues and clues. Combined with his understanding of the godly spirits and various secret techniques, many ideas appeared in his mind. Not long after, he had an idea and a plan. Then, he tried to channel his power and cast a dark golden dermic seal into the 18 demon god statues. However, when the seals entered the demon god statues, they were like clay oxen entering the sea. He was unwilling to give up and tried a few more times, but they all ended in failure. Therefore, he calmed down and pondered, trying to improve on his previous idea. A few hours later, he had another idea and began his second attempt. This time, after the plum blossom-like golden seals flew into the demon god statue, there was finally a reaction. The 18 demon god statues emitted a sacred golden light and moved around the altar. They began to change their positions. Finally, it's done. Chapter 22:36. Ji Tianqing began to form mysterious and profound seals. At the same time, he began to observe the movements of the Yao God statues. He wasn't in a hurry and used a total of 12 hours to rearrange the 18 demon god statues. Buzz! The moment he finished casting the spell, the 18 statues lit up with white light at the same time, illuminating the entire hall. Holy white light converged on the origin immortal divine formation in front of him, forming a teleportation gate of white light. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing couldn't wait to step into the light door. His figure flashed and disappeared. A moment later, he left the 5th floor of the divine pagoda and entered a gloomy space. There was nothing around him, above and below him. Everything was pitch black as far as the eye could see, just like the cold void. But Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that this space was not the void. There was air, spirit qi, and all sorts of energy ripples. This is the 6th floor of the divine pagoda. Why is it so empty? There's nothing here. This shouldn't be the case. It's still a king-level divine artifact. Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion as he sharply observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he saw a faint white light in the distant night sky in front of him. He hurriedly flew over, and it took him an entire hour to get close to the white light. Upon closer inspection, he saw that it was a belt of light more than 10,000 feet long. The brightest light on the surface was white, while the inner layer was wrapped in red, blue, and green light. Moreover, the multicolored rays of light in this belt of light were all twisted and folded. Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that the belt of light not only contained powerful spatial energy, but also ripples of the power of time. The power of space and time. This is a scene created by the distortion of space-time. After a moment of shock, he suddenly understood something, and a look of shock and joy appeared on his face. In other words, the space-time of this floor is distorted and different from the outside world. Time distortion meant that the flow of time here was different from that of the outside world. It was possible that time had been accelerated. For example, 1 day in the outside world was 10 days here. It was also possible that time had been slowed down. 1 day in the outside world was only 2 hours here. This kind of space-time power could only be used and controlled by powerful gods. In the mortal world, such a situation would only occur in extremely rare and special terrains. Ji Tianqing was overjoyed and secretly thought that he had picked up a treasure. In order to confirm his guess, he hurriedly left the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. Shwa! With a flash of light, he appeared at the peak of the desolate mountain. At this moment, it was the middle of the night. There were few stars in the night sky, and a dim yellow crescent moon was slowly descending. Ji Tianqing noted down the time and returned to the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda, entering the 6th level. He sat cross-legged in the dark space and began to cultivate. After circulating his energy for 100 rounds, his spirit and strength had recovered a lot, and he ended his cultivation. He estimated that he had cultivated for about 4 days. Then, he left the divine pagoda and returned to the desolate mountain peak. The result stunned him on the spot. The sky was still dark, and the night wind was still whistling. Only around 2 hours had passed in the 5 elements world. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but reveal a joyful smile as he secretly clenched his fists. That's great. The 6th level of the divine pagoda is indeed a space where time accelerates. I have cultivated for 4 days, but only 2 hours have passed in the 5 elements world. The difference in the flow of time between the two is close to 50 times. In this way, I have cultivated in seclusion on the 6th level of the divine pagoda for 50 years, and only 1 year has passed in the outside world. Any martial artist would understand what this meant. If it were any martial saint who had picked up such an incredible divine artifact, they would be crazy with excitement. However, Ji Tianqing was experienced and knowledgeable, so he could still maintain his calm and indifferent. After all, in his soul's memory, he had seen a divine artifact that was even more powerful than this. He had also personally refined a few divine artifacts that could change the flow of time. Ji Tianqing's guess was confirmed, so he planned to cultivate in seclusion in the divine pagoda for a period of time. Not only to heal his injuries, but also to quickly increase his strength. However, before he went into seclusion, he sent a message to Huanglong Daoist so that Huanglong would not worry. Huanglong, the main culprit who kidnapped my disciples, is Yi Lushui. He set up an ambush in the Yuanzhe Valley and tried to kill me. I had a big battle with him and severely injured him. In the short term, he should not dare to invade the Pillar of Heaven's mountains again. I have also suffered heavy injuries and am now cultivating in seclusion in a secret realm. In about a month, I will return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. During this period, you must guard the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and not let the enemy have a chance to attack. After sending the message, Ji Tianqing returned to the 6th level of the divine pagoda and cultivated in seclusion. At the same time, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains under the cover of night was quiet and peaceful. However, in the Pillar of Heaven's palace at the peak of the mountain, there were bright lights and many figures moving about. In the conference hall, Huanglong Daoist sat at the head of the table, his eyes solemn and his face full of worry. On both sides of the hall, there were a few elders in purple robes standing. There were also many messenger guards going in and out of the hall, constantly reporting the news. Great Immortal, we have searched the 6 Flowers Valley in the south but did not find any clues. Great Immortal, dozens of guards have searched Fenging Mountain but did not find young Master Ji or any traces of a fight. Great Immortal, the 4 elders have already sent out 300 disciples to search the surrounding 100,000 miles. The news came one after another, causing the atmosphere in the hall to become heavier and heavier. Huanglong Daoist and the few elders' expressions became more and more worried and anxious. Ever since the inner disciples went missing and Ji Tianqing went to rescue them alone, it had been a few days. Until now, Ji Tianqing had not appeared and there was no news of him. The few elders were filled with worry, and Huanglong Daoist was even more worried. He had not slept for a few days, but he did not feel tired at all. Great Immortal, Great Immortal. You are an omnipotent God. There is no one and nothing that can stump you. Now that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is recovering, the situation is good. You will soon be able to restore your reputation. At such a crucial time, nothing must happen to you. Huanglong Daoist slowly closed his eyes and prayed silently in his heart. At this moment, a ray of spiritual light pierced through the night sky and came from afar. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the ray of spiritual light flew into the conference hall and landed in front of Huanglong Daoist. He was instantly jolted awake and hurriedly opened his eyes. He stretched out his hand to grab the jade bamboo slip and impatiently read the message in it. After a while, when he finished reading the message in the jade bamboo slip, the worry and anxiety in his heart immediately disappeared. He slowly kept the jade bamboo slip and heaved a sigh of relief. A gratified smile appeared on his old face. Chapter 2237. Time flew by. After Yi Lushui left Yuanzhe Valley, he flew north for 3 days and 3 nights. He searched all the areas within tens of thousands of miles along the way. Needless to say, he couldn't even find Ji Tianqing's shadow. It was a waste of effort. His injuries were too severe, and he had used up too much of his spiritual power. After 3 days, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. Therefore, he was filled with resentment and unwillingness, and gave up on the search and pursuit. He found a hidden place in the mountains and hid in an underground cave. He circulated his spiritual power and healed his injuries for 7 days and 7 nights. After his injuries were stabilized and his spiritual power recovered by half, he left. It was impossible to continue searching for Ji Tianqing. After all, Ji Tianqing had escaped for more than 10 days. Where could he find him? He also thought that Ji Tianqing might have escaped back to Sky Pillar Mountain. But he was injured and his strength was weak. He couldn't go to Sky Pillar Mountain. Sky Pillar Mountain was protected by a super formation and Huanglong Daoist. It also had many trump cards and secrets. In his current situation, if he were to attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he would only be forced to flee. After thinking about it, Yi Lushui could only suppress his anger and leave Sky Pillar Mountain quietly. He returned to Heaven and Divine Nation. Although martial god Tianju said that if he didn't kill Ji Tianqing, he shouldn't go back to see him. But Yi Lushui believed that martial god Tianju would forgive him. Moreover, he had to report this matter to martial god Tianju in detail. 7 days later, Yi Lushui returned to Heaven and Divine Nation. On the night of his return, Yi Lushui didn't rest and rushed to the secret room in the depths of the Divine Palace. Divine Lord, subordinate Yi Lushui is here to ask for forgiveness. Yi Lushui knelt outside the secret room and kowtowed respectfully. The black stone door of the secret room lit up with white light and condensed into a mirror. A middle-aged man in a golden robe and a crown appeared in the mirror. He looked down at Yi Lushui with a gloomy face. Yi Lushui. You were delayed for a month before coming back to report the news. Have you completed the mission? Yi Lushui was already mentally prepared. He said guiltily, reporting to the Divine Lord, I devised a scheme to lure Ji Tianqing out of Tianju Mountain and set up an ambush in the wilderness. However, Ji Tianqing's strength far exceeded my expectations. He actually killed over 30 martial monarchs that his subordinates had mobilized. Even if this subordinate used the divine ruler, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. At the last moment, his subordinate was about to use the divine ruler to kill him. I don't know what method he used, but he was wrapped in a golden light and disappeared into thin air. Yi Lushui gave a brief account of what had happened. After he finished speaking, he kowtowed in fear and trepidation as he begged for forgiveness. He said, I was unable to complete the task and allowed Ji Tianqing to escape again. I am incompetent, and I deserve to die. Please punish me, Divine Lord. The face of martial god Tianju in the mirror was as black as charcoal. He frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Bastard! You useless piece of trash! I gave you the Taiyin soul-severing ruler and you still couldn't kill him with the divine ruler in your hand. No matter how strong he is, he's only a martial saint. How could he resist the power of the divine ruler? Martial god Tianju was furious and scolded Yi Lushui. However, Yi Lushui didn't show any dissatisfaction, as if he was ready to be beaten or scolded. After scolding Yi Lushui, martial god Tianju's anger slowly dissipated. Yi Lushui saw that he had calmed down and said respectfully, reporting to the Divine Lord, this subordinate activated the Divine Ruler and used the soul-severing slash. The space within a few hundred miles was sealed. Ji Tianqing couldn't have teleported away. However, he was wrapped in a golden light and disappeared in front of this subordinate's eyes. This subordinate suspects that he might have a divine weapon in his hand, or he might have cultivated some divine technique. Martial god Tianju frowned and thought for a while. Then, he nodded in agreement and said, yes, only a divine weapon could resist the power of the divine ruler. This is most likely. As for the divine technique, Ji Tianqing is proficient in countless divine techniques. However, he hasn't recovered to the divine realm and can't use them. Yi Lushui hesitated for a while and said, Divine Lord, now that Ji Tianqing is powerful and has a divine weapon, he's invincible among those below the martial god realm. Even if this subordinate used the divine ruler, I couldn't kill him. Why don't we let him live for a few more years? After you've mastered the divine skill, you can come out and kill him personally. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by martial god Tianju. Idiot! Are you scared out of your wits by Ji Tianqing? With his monstrous growth speed, I don't know how strong he'll be in a few years. He's a thorn in my flesh, a thorn in my side. I must get rid of him in the shortest time possible. Yi Lushui was stunned and said with a troubled expression, but you still need a few more years to come out of seclusion. Currently, none of us can deal with him. Martial god Tianju squinted his eyes and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He sneered and said, if none of my subordinates can kill him, then what about Bei Mingshan? Pass down my order now. I want to make a deal with Bei Mingshan. Yi Lushui immediately understood. He quickly took out a communication jade slip and wrote down the order in the jade slip according to martial god Tianju's order. A month passed by unknowingly. That evening, at the Yin-Yang secret realm in the northernmost part of the divine ruins, a golden light suddenly lit up on a barren mountain that was thousands of feet tall. Whoosh! With a flash of light, a figure appeared on the mountain peak. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. He was tall and handsome. His eyes were as bright as stars and he emitted a mysterious and powerful aura. It was Ji Tianqing who had just come out of seclusion. He stood on top of a millstone and gazed at the setting sun with a playful smile on his face. It's only been a month outside. I don't think anything has happened. However, who would have thought that I have been cultivating in seclusion in the 6th level of the Holy Pagoda for 4 years? Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with mystery and dominance. For 4 whole years, he had been in the darkness of time and space, concentrating on his cultivation. Previously, he had won first place in the Divine Martial Sacred Assembly and received 300 million spiritual stones. After 4 years of seclusion, he had used up all the cultivation resources. Although he had used up a large amount of resources, his improvement was shocking. During this period, he had increased his cultivation level by 2 levels and successfully reached the rank 4 Martial Sage realm. Now, his combat strength was 10 times stronger than before. After 4 years of cultivation, the heaven-repairing pearl's power had recovered to its previous state. Ji Tianqing had absolute confidence that if he met Yi Lushui again, he would not be defeated. Even if Yi Lushui had the extreme Yin soul-splitting ruler, he would not be a threat to him. Whoosh! Chapter 2238. Dark North Mountain. At the center of the mountain was a dark brown wasteland. At the end of the wasteland was a giant mountain that was 3,000 feet tall. It was known as the Divine Mountain of Dark North Mountain. Below the waist of the Divine Mountain, it was pitch black, cold, and deathly silent. Above the waist of the mountain, the rocks and soil were dark red. It was extremely strange. Black clouds and demonic aura covered the entire Divine Mountain, causing it to appear indistinct in the clouds. At the peak of the Divine Mountain, there was a majestic, mysterious, and solemn black palace. That was the famous Baiming Palace. Back then, Luo Shui had entered this place to avenge Luo Li and fought the ancestral demon god. In that battle, more than half of Dark North Palace was destroyed and reduced to ruins. The present Dark North Palace was rebuilt by the demon race craftsmen. At this moment, deep within Dark North Palace, in a wide and dark hall, the walls were inlaid with blood crystals that shone with a dark red light. In the middle of the hall, there was a 100-meter-tall black altar that was inlaid with gems and skulls. A burly dark red figure was standing respectfully under the altar, quietly and solemnly. This was a demon race expert that was more than 10 feet tall. He wore a fiery red robe. The robe was embroidered with images of white bones and demons. A pair of ghost claws was embroidered on his chest and collar. He had no hair on his body. His head was bald, except for a few pieces of black scales that shone with a cold light. His hands that were exposed were also a pair of cold black claws. His ferocious face was also covered with a layer of black dragon scales. In his large eyes, there was a pair of dark blue pupils that flickered with dark blue flames. Without a doubt, this person was the strongest expert under the ancestral demon god, Great Demon Saint Ling Xian. He stood with his hands by his side and waited quietly for a moment. On the eerie altar, dark red blood flames ignited. Immediately after, a black figure that seemed both real and illusory rose from the blood flames. This figure was as strong as a black bear and emitted an extremely domineering demonic aura. It had 3 large heads, 6 pairs of blade-like wings on its pitch-black back, and 4 thick and sturdy arms in front of its body. Seeing this black figure appear, Great Demon Saint Ling Xian hurriedly knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. Greetings, primogenitor. The sinister and terrifying black figure on the altar was the projection of the ancestral fiend god. He opened his scarlet eyes and looked down at Ling Xian, who was below the altar, and asked in a deep voice, Ling Xian, I have given you and Ming Tua full authority to handle the affairs of North Underworld Mountain. I want to heal in the Blood Sea Abyss and break through the shackles of the deity realm. What is it that you can't make a decision and have to ask this god? Ling Xian lowered his head and replied in a respectful tone, reporting to primogenitor, this subordinate has 2 matters to report. I must ask you to make a decision. Firstly, martial god Ji Tianqing has sent a message. He wants to make a deal with you. Please kill Ji Tianqing. Hearing this news, the ancestral demon god narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly, Kikik, a martial god of heaven's end can't even kill a puny martial saint. Humph. His original body is cultivating in seclusion. He must have sent his subordinate martial saint to assassinate Ji Tianqing, but failed. He can't do it himself, but he wants to kill Ji Tianqing immediately, so he can only come to me for help. At this point, the ancestral demon god paused for a moment and said in a venomous tone, if I could leave North Underworld Mountain and kill Ji Tianqing personally, how could I let him live until now? What is martial god Tianju's condition? Ling Xian quickly replied, as long as you kill Ji Tianqing, the Kenshin bloodline will belong to you and the burial of Heaven's sword will belong to him. At most, in 5 years, he will end his seclusion and complete his divine arts. At that time, he will kill martial god Luo Shui with his own hands. And the territory of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom will belong to North Underworld Mountain. Even with the shrewdness of the ancestral demon god, he couldn't help but be startled. He asked in astonishment, "Is martial god Tianju crazy? He wants to use martial god Luo Shui's life and the territory of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom in exchange for Ji Tianqing's life?" Ling Xian nodded, "That's right. Looks like martial god Tianju hates Ji Tianqing to the bone and can't tolerate him anymore." The ancestral demon god sneered, "It's not that he can't tolerate Ji Tianqing, but that he can't let Kenshin live. In order to find the way to ascend, he has already lost his mind and is willing to do anything." Ling Xian probed, "Ancestor, do we agree to this deal?" The ancestral demon god sneered and shook his head, "I have to go all out to break through to the god realm, so I can't leave Sacred Mountain in the near future. Although this deal is very tempting, I can't agree to it." Since the ancestral demon god had made a decision, Ling Xian naturally wouldn't say anything more. He nodded, "I understand, I will reject martial god Tianju later." The ancestral demon god nodded slightly and asked in a deep voice, "What's the second thing?" Ling Xian frowned and revealed an indignant expression as he reported, "Ancestor, it has been 2 months since those foreign powerhouses invaded Dark North Mountain. In these 2 months, they have wantonly slaughtered our people and powerhouses, and they have already taken over 5 large regions in the south, totaling 200 tribes. In the beginning, they didn't understand our language and only knew how to kill and plunder. However, since a month ago, they have gradually learned our language." Chapter 2239. The next morning. To the North Underworld Mountain, there was not much difference between day and night. Even during the day, there was basically no sunlight. The sky was covered by demonic clouds and black gas, and the world was dark. On the wasteland below the Divine Mountain, the cold wind whistled. At this moment, a black shadow that was thousands of feet long came from the sky in the south, quickly crossing the sky above the wasteland. That huge, long, and narrow shadow looked like a huge ship. It was unknown what material this ship was made of, but it was completely black and cold, but it flashed with faint starlight. The ship had 3 floors, and it was tightly wrapped on the outside. Not only were there countless arrays on it, there were also rows of neatly arranged star crossbows, flashing with sharp cold light. On the sharp bow of the ship, there was a black flag that fluttered in the wind. On the tattered black flag, there was a vague, strange pattern that was emitting an ancient aura. Whoosh! After a few breaths, this mysterious black ship passed through hundreds of miles of wasteland, and flew to the peak of the Divine Mountain. The ship stopped above the North Underworld Palace, and floated motionlessly in the air. Then, a black iron door at the bow of the ship opened. Clang clang clang. Footsteps that sounded like metal clashing sounded. A tall and sturdy silver figure walked out of the door. This was a foreign race man wearing silver armor, and his eyes were as red as fire. His upper body was no different from a human, but there was a patch of black scales on his chest, and there were 4 circles of dark red patterns on it. Its lower body was very similar to that of a male lion, with 4 thick legs and wide hooves. If Ji Tianqing was here, he would immediately recognize that this foreign race man was an Yu. And Yu walked to the bow of the battleship and looked down at Beiming Palace with an indifferent expression. His lips curled into a cold smile. Then, 8 foreign race guards wearing black armor walked out of the ship. 6 of them stayed on the ship, and the other 2 came behind Yu, and followed him closely. At the same time, outside the gate of the North Underworld Palace, the great demon Saint Ling Xian, the 3rd demon Saint Xingtuo, and more than 10 experts of the demon race were waiting in the square. Seeing the black ship in the sky, everyone frowned, and a trace of seriousness flashed in their eyes. Whether it was the devil generals or the 2 devil saints, they could all feel the immense pressure. They were well aware that the giant black warship was the vessel of a foreign race powerhouse, and it was far more powerful than any of the flying ships on the Shenwu continent. Ling Xian glanced at Ma Tuo beside him and said in a low voice, "You and I will go and welcome you. The others will wait here." With that said, Ling Xian took the lead and stepped into the sky, flying towards the black battleship. Ba Tuo hurriedly followed, his posture full of vigilance. Shua! In the blink of an eye, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo arrived in the sky, stopping 100 steps away from Enyu. The black battleship was covered by an invisible shield. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo couldn't enter it recklessly. They could only stand in the sky. The two of them looked at Enyu coldly and bowed reluctantly. "Greetings, Lord Enyu." Not long ago, the two of them had fought with Enyu twice. However, the result was very tragic. Both of them were beaten half to death, and luckily managed to escape. Now that he saw Enyu again, Ling Xian could still suppress his anger and killing intent. His expression was still calm. However, Ma Tuo's expression was cold. His eyes were filled with hatred. Enyu looked at the two of them and smiled. He nodded and said, "I am very happy to see you again." He said this in the language of the demon race. The accent was strange and awkward, but they could still understand. Ling Xian cupped his hands and said, "Lord Enyu, if you have come with sincerity, please follow me. Let's go to the Dark North Palace to talk." Enyu thought for a moment before he understood what he meant. He immediately stopped smiling and frowned. "Of course I have come with sincerity. However, you mean, you want to talk with me? Where is your Lord Founder? Why is he not showing up?" Ling Xian explained in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Lord Enyu, the Honorable Lord Founder is cultivating in seclusion. He is not meeting with guests at the moment. As the great demon saint of the Dark North Mountain, I am also the Lord Founder's most trusted aide. Before the Lord Founder went into seclusion, he passed the authority of the Dark North Mountain to me. Therefore, I will talk with you today." This was what he had discussed with the ancestor devil god. The ancestor devil god would not show up. He would observe Enyu in the dark. At the same time, he could maintain his mystery and prevent himself from being exposed. Enyu was even more unhappy. Flames danced in his scarlet eyes. He sneered, "Hee hee. I have come with sincerity, but your ancestor is so perfunctory. Since that is the case, there is nothing to talk about between us. But don't forget, I only used 2 months to snatch away 30% of your territory. At most a year later, the entire Dark North Mountain will belong to me. At that time, even if your ancestor comes to beg for mercy, it will be useless." After saying that, Enyu turned to leave. Ba Tuo was instantly filled with anger. He was so embarrassed that he almost went berserk. Ling Xian was also furious. He could not bear such arrogant humiliation. However, he remembered the ancestor devil god's advice. He quickly shouted, "Lord Enyu, please wait. What I said just now is all true. Please calm down. Now that my clan is in a precarious situation, you do not have enough manpower. If we fight with each other, it will only be harmful. I hope that Lord Enyu will not be calculative. Let us sit down and discuss about cooperation. No matter what the conditions are, we can discuss it. This is also our ancestors' intention." Enyu had just turned and walked a few steps. After hearing this, he stopped. After thinking for a moment, he turned back and nodded with a smile. "Amen. Since your primogenitor is willing to cooperate with us, that would be for the best." As he said that, he walked out of the warship. Bringing along 2 black armored guards, he flew down to Dark North Palace. Ling Xian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly brought Ba Tuo and followed. When Enyu and the 2 guards landed on the plaza, 10 over-demon experts who had been waiting for a long time quickly bowed. Enyu did not bother to look at them. He walked through the crowd and stepped into the meeting hall. After 10 breaths of time, everyone entered the hall and took their seats. Ling Xian and Yu sat at the head of the table. The two black armored guards stood behind Yu without moving. Only then did Yu directly state his intentions. It has been 2 months since I came to Dark North Mountain. During this time, I have conquered more than 200 tribes. I have gradually understood the situation of Dark North Mountain and the entire continent. I am very gratified. This is a vast and rich continent. It has inexhaustible resources. It is a pity that the most fertile land has been taken over by those lowly humans. Even you brave demons can only hole up in this barren and bitter cold land. Yi Mo thought to himself. Chapter 2240. Yu's words were very provocative, causing Ling Xian's heart to heat up. After all, this was also his idea, and the goal of the entire demon race. He pondered for a moment, then said to Yu with a serious expression, "Lord Yu, I believe this is your original intention, and you have the ability to do so. At the same time, this has always been my race's wish, and we have the same goal. But, before we decide to cooperate, I have a few questions that I hope you can answer." Yu nodded slightly, looked at him calmly, and said, "Please speak." Ling Xian did not beat around the bush, and said directly, "The first question, Lord Yu only has 80 guards under his command. Although those guards were all very powerful, there were simply too few of them. You also know that the continent is vast, and there are billions of living beings." Yu had expected him to ask this question, and could not help but reveal a confident smile, and explained, "I have already prepared for this question. As long as you demons are willing to cooperate, I will gather more people. Now there are 80 powerhouses, and soon there will be 800. Even if we succeed in conquering a large territory, the number can still rise to 8,000, or even 80,000. Also, although my race is few in number, you demons have many. This is also the reason why I want to cooperate with you. Most importantly, you don't have to do everything by yourself to rule a territory. Using people to control people is the best strategy." Ling Xian nodded, expressing his agreement, and continued to ask, "The second question, where did Lord Yu come from? On this continent, we have never seen you or your subordinates. Since we want to cooperate, we have to be honest, at least you can't hide your origin." Yu immediately frowned, his eyes became cold, and said in a cold voice, This answer, is it really that important? We come from the ground, we come from the sky, or, from the underworld." Ling Xian immediately understood what he meant, and bowed slightly, saying, "Sorry, I was rude. Since Lord Yu is not willing to tell, then let's forget about it. The third question, if we start to cooperate, how will we distribute the troops? How will we distribute the territories that we have conquered?" Yu sneered, "Very simple, in the early stage of cooperation, we will allocate 500,000 demon warriors for me to use. As for the territories that I will invade, I will first choose a territory as my base camp. The territories that were subsequently occupied would be divided according to the amount of contribution. If it's not clear, then we'll split it in half." Ling Xian immediately frowned and said in a deep voice, "Senior Yu, our clan has just gone through a war that lasted for several years, and we lost over 10 million warriors. Now that we've just started working together, isn't it a bit too much for you to ask for 500,000 warriors? Is there a lot?" Yu looked at him from the corner of his eyes and sneered. "I only need 500,000 warriors in the early stages. Once we reach the middle and late stages, I might need another 5 million warriors. If you don't even give me 500,000 warriors, then there's no need for us to cooperate." Ling Xian hurriedly waved his hand and said in a serious tone, "No, what I mean is that as long as you show enough sincerity, I can give you 500,000 warriors." Yu sneered. "Sure enough, there are conditions. Tell me." Seeing that the time was right, Ling Xian revealed the plan he had decided on long ago. "First of all, I would like to ask Lord Yu to return the 5 regions of the south, as well as the 200+ tribes of my clan. My clan will choose a more suitable territory to be your headquarters." And Yu frowned and asked, "Where?" Ling Xian smiled. "South of Dark North Mountain, there's a region with a radius of 1,000,000 kilometers called the 72 cities. There are 1 billion people there, 72 majestic cities, and endless mountain ranges. There are countless cultivation resources hidden there." And Yu had studied the map of Shenwu continent and knew that this region was indeed more fertile than Dark North Mountain. He couldn't help but be tempted, and after a moment of consideration, he nodded. "All right, as long as you send 500,000 warriors, I can take down the 72 cities in half a month." Ling Xian nodded in satisfaction and continued, "Aside from this matter, Lord Yu needs to kill one more person in order to show enough sincerity." "Kill who?" And Yu frowned and sneered. "Could it be one of the 3 war gods? If that's the case, then forget it." Ling Xian hurriedly shook his head. "Of course not, it's just a small war saint. That young war saint is called Ji Tianqing, and he's the leader of Tianzhu Peak. You've studied the situation of the continent, so you should know that Tianzhu Peak is not far from the 72 cities. Furthermore, Tianzhu Peak's territory, population, and resources are much more abundant than the 72 cities." And Yu thought for a moment and smiled knowingly. This seat remembers now. I heard that the Fiend army was defeated at the hands of this guy. You guys call him the Killing God, and he's the one who slaughtered millions of demon warriors. Ling Xian nodded with a gloomy expression and said in a cold voice, "That's right, it's him. My clan has a blood feud with him, and we can't live under the same sky." And you didn't care at all. "If that's the case, then I'll agree to help you kill him to show my sincerity. However, after I kill him, I still want to take over Tianzhu Peak. At that time, Tianzhu Peak and the 72 cities will belong to me." Ling Xian had also guessed that Yu was insatiably greedy and would make such a request. He took advantage of the situation and said, "Tianzhu Peak can belong to you, but we want Ji Tianqing's corpse and his sword." And Yu nodded without hesitation and smiled. "If that's the case, then it's settled. The deadline will be 10 days. Within 10 days, I will kill Ji Tianqing. As for you guys, you have to gather 500,000 warriors as soon as possible. I still have to lead them to open up new territory." After he finished speaking, Yu laughed heartily and stood up to leave. He left the meeting hall with 2 black armored guards and flew towards the warship in the sky. Ling Xian, Ba Tuo, and a dozen demon generals all stood up to send him off. After a long time, the pitch-black warship in the sky flew away. Only then did Ling Xian and the rest relax. Everyone's expressions became serious, and Ba Tuo was filled with resentment. He couldn't help but complain. "Despicable. That guy is too arrogant. He doesn't even put my clan in his eyes. He only has 80 guards, so what right does he have to talk about cooperating with my clan and even divide the world? Even if his strength is not bad, he's too arrogant. Does he think that the 3 divine kingdoms are pushovers? That he wants to conquer the entire Shenwu continent? Isn't that just wishful thinking?" A dozen demon generals all nodded and agreed with Ba Tuo. They were very unhappy with Yu's arrogant attitude. Ling Xian waved his hand and sneered. "You stubborn guys, do you know what expediency is? Yu is ambitious, greedy and insatiable. Let them stir up the wind and rain, and help us get rid of the enemy." Chapter 2241. Hearing Ling Xian's words, Ma Tuo and the other generals came to a realization. It turned out that the ancestral god fiend had other plans. The cooperation with Yu was only a temporary measure. With the ancestral god fiend's strength and arrogance, why would he care about these foreign races? After figuring this out, everyone's emotions calmed down a lot. After whispering to each other for a while, everyone dispersed and left the conference hall one after another. Ling Xian was the last to leave. Not long after he walked out of the meeting hall, he met a woman in a black robe at the corner of the corridor. This woman was 7 feet tall and had delicate features. Her skin was light purple, and she looked no different from a demon. However, compared to a real demon, her body was petite and weak. However, her black robe was embroidered with the image of a skeleton and a demon. It was obvious that she was an internal affairs officer of Dark North Palace. After seeing Ling Xian, she bowed respectfully and said, "This subordinate greets the great devil sage." Ling Xian nodded and calmly said, "Ah Ku, go and pass on my orders. Summon the chiefs of the Bay, Secret Flame, and Jialua tribes to Dark North Palace for an audience." The woman called Ah Ku cupped her hands and bowed. This subordinate obeys. After bowing, she did not seem to have any intention of leaving. After hesitating for a while, she carefully asked, "Great Devil Sage, I just saw a huge flying ship arrive in the sky, and a few strange-looking fellows flew down from it. Are those the foreign powerhouses who invaded the 5 southern regions and took away more than 200 of our tribes?" The great devil sage did not hide anything and nodded. "That's them." Ah Ku frowned and pretended not to understand. "Why did they come to Dark North Palace? Are they here to ask for peace? Or, do they want to negotiate a temporary truce with you?" The great devil sage shook his head and sneered. "Those foreign races are powerful and ambitious. They actually want to cooperate with us to divide Shenwu continent." Ah Ku revealed a startled expression before covering her mouth and chuckling. "Isn't that too laughable? No matter how strong they are, they only have so few people. They actually want to divide the entire continent. The brains of these strange races must have been flooded with water. How did you reject them? Could it be that you directly chased them away?" Great Demon Saint glanced at her and shook his head, "Of course not. Wouldn't it be a pity if we don't make use of such a greedy and ambitious fellow?" A strange light flashed in Ah Ku's eyes. He frowned and asked in surprise, "Great Devil Saint, do you really agree to cooperate with the pagans?" "Why not?" The Great Demon Saint walked towards the end of the corridor and said, "If you want to work with us, you have to show us enough sincerity and work for us. I asked him to attack the 72 cities and make them his headquarters. Return the 5 regions in the south to my race. In addition, he still had to kill his way to Tianzhu Mountain and get rid of that bastard Ji Tianqing. Humph, this is called killing someone with a borrowed knife without shedding any blood." At this point, the great demonic saint had already reached the end and was about to turn and leave. Ah Ku's body suddenly stiffened, and a strong sense of anxiety flashed through his eyes. She hurriedly chased after the great demonic saint and persuaded, "Great demonic saint, you are a wise expert. How can you be deceived by those pagans? They are using our race to help them invade our territory and plunder our wealth and resources. Moreover, they have killed millions of our people and invaded more than 200 of our tribes. This is a blood feud. Now that you have agreed to cooperate with them, won't you disappoint those innocent people who died in vain?" Hearing her words, the great demonic saint stopped and turned to look at her with a cold and solemn expression. "Ah Ku! Don't forget your identity." The great demonic saint stared into Ah Ku's eyes and said indifferently, "Don't forget that you are just a lowly blood-robed guard. Although you are the most outstanding and quick-witted of all the blood-robed guards, I have appreciated you. It was I who appreciated your talent and promoted you step by step, allowing you to become the Internal Affairs Deacon today and enter Baiming Palace. But don't forget that you are just a lowly Internal Affairs Deacon. Since when did you have the right to interfere in government affairs?" The so-called blood-robed guards were originally puppets that the demon kings had captured from other continents using magical treasures and refined in the Blood Sea abyss. Now that 3 years had passed, most of the blood-robed guards had died in battle. They had either died in the line of duty or died tragically on the battlefield. Only a few of the blood-robed guards had survived, but they were all outstanding individuals. Among them, the most outstanding blood-robed guard was this woman named Ah Ku. In the past 3 years, not only had her strength increased a lot, but she had also become very quick-witted, which was why the great demonic saint had placed her in an important position. However, the great demonic saint was naturally suspicious. When he saw that Ah Ku was a little too talkative today, he immediately became angry and reprimanded her. Seeing that the great demonic saint was angry, Ah Ku revealed a look of fear and trepidation. She quickly bowed and said, "The great demonic saint is right. This subordinate knows her mistake and has overstepped her boundaries." The great demonic saint looked at her coldly and said in a deep voice, "In the future, you must be careful with your words and actions. Only then can you live a long life. I have to teach you a lesson for today's matter so that you will remember. Go to the torture department and receive 50 soul punishment whips." Ah Ku's body suddenly trembled, and her expression became quite unsightly. In the past few years in the North Underworld Mountain, she had experienced the cruelty of the torture department several times and the terrifying power of the soul punishment whips. Almost every once in a while, someone would be punished and their divine soul would be shattered by the soul punishment whips, dying on the spot. She had been hit several times by the soul punishment whips. Although she had kept her life, the pain and torture that went deep into her soul made her shudder. When the great demonic saint saw that she was standing there in a daze, he frowned and shouted angrily, "What are you standing there for? Why aren't you getting out of here? Do you want me to execute you?" Ah Ku immediately came to her senses and quickly bowed to leave. The great demonic saint coldly watched her leave. When her figure disappeared at the end of the corridor, he frowned and muttered to himself, "This bitch is getting more and more presumptuous. After entering the North Underworld Palace, she actually dares to talk about and interfere with the government affairs." Thinking of this, he raised his hand and released a purple light, as if he was releasing some kind of signal. After a while, a hazy and distorted black shadow appeared behind him with a swoosh sound. The black shadow bowed and said in a hoarse and deep voice, "Greetings, Master. Please give me your orders." The great demonic saint's back was facing the black shadow, and he said expressionlessly, "Sanying, secretly watch Ah Ku and see what that bitch wants to do. If there is anything unusual, immediately report to me." "Yes, Master." The black shadow called Sanying cupped his hands and disappeared into thin air. Chapter 2242 North Underworld Mountain. Jingshan Region's 100 Origin City. On the surface, this ancient city with 1,000 years of history was still peaceful. More than 800,000 demon civilians lived in the city built with black rocks. It was a prosperous city. But in reality, this city had been occupied by Anu long ago. The city lord and the priests of the major tribes were all under Anu's control. Moreover, this city had become Anu's temporary residence. At this moment, in the majestic city lord's mansion, Anu was standing in the middle of the square, giving out orders with a solemn expression. In front of him, 9 black-armored foreign race guards stood in a row. The leader was the captain of the guards, Anu's confidant. The 9 of them stood respectfully, listening to Anu's orders. In the sky above the square, a black warship that was thousands of feet long floated, emitting a solemn and murderous aura. Anu's sharp gaze swept across the 9 guards, and he said in a dignified tone, "There are too many things that I can't be bothered to explain to you. All you need to know is that if our race wants to establish a foothold here and develop, we can only rely on others. Even if we know that we will be at a disadvantage, we can only compromise. Temporary forbearance is for our long-term development. This world sealed by a mysterious force is far more fertile than the world we invaded before. If we can occupy this world, we can spend the next 1,000 years in peace, and we won't have to wander the stars anymore." The 9 guards bowed and said in unison, "Captain, please rest assured that we will complete the mission perfectly." Anu nodded in satisfaction and said, "That martial sage named Ji Tianqing, since he can occupy a territory and kill millions of demons, he must have some tricks up his sleeve. Although all of you are elites and are piloting my warship, you must not underestimate him. Remember, not only must you kill him, but you must also return unharmed." The 9 guards bowed again and said in unison, "We understand." "And you did not say anything else?" He waved his hand and ordered, "All right, you may set off. I will wait for your triumphant return and bring back that kid's body and sword." The 9 guards bowed in unison, then stepped into the sky and boarded the black warship. Not long after, the black battleship flew high into the sky and headed south as fast as lightning. And you watched as the battleship disappeared into the horizon. Only then did he turn around and return to the city lord's mansion to continue handling his affairs. It was noon. Pillar of Heaven Mountains. The warm sunlight shone on the mountain peak, and the blue sky was filled with white clouds. Everything was peaceful. The disciples focused on their cultivation while the patrolling guards did their duty. Huanglong Daoist and the 2 elders were discussing the expansion of the Spirit Beast Garden in the study room. Ji Tianqing was meditating in a secret room in his residence in the Pillar of Heaven Palace. He came back a few days ago. Only Huanglong Daoist and a few elders knew about it. When Huanglong Daoist saw him, he was keenly aware of the change in him and was shocked speechless on the spot. Only Huanglong could see that Ji Tianqing's strength had increased several times in the 1 month that he had been missing. He couldn't figure out how Ji Tianqing did it. But he absolutely believed that no matter what miracle happened to his master, it was only natural. As for Yi Liushui's matter, he didn't ask about it. He believed that his master would have a corresponding countermeasure and plan. What he needed to do was to protect the Pillar of Heaven Mountains and listen to his master's orders at any time. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. The sun was setting in the west. The warm sunlight made people feel even more lazy. Huanglong Daoist and the 2 elders finally agreed on a plan and left the study room together. At this moment, a loud bugle horn sounded in the sky. On the dojo in the middle of the holy city, a signal arrow shot into the sky and exploded in the sky, releasing a dazzling flame. Huanglong Daoist and the 2 elders stopped in their tracks. Their expressions changed and they frowned. Is this a signal to warn of danger? Normally, the guards on the dojo will only release the signal arrow when there is a strong danger. What's going on? Is there a strong enemy invading our sect? The 3 of them looked at each other and revealed a worried and confused expression. Let's go and take a look. Huanglong Daoist ordered. He hurriedly brought the 2 elders out of the palace and flew into the sky. As soon as they arrived in the sky, the 3 of them saw a huge black shadow floating in the sky to the north of the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. From afar, the long black shadow looked like a huge ship, but it also looked like a magic treasure flying boat. It floated thousands of feet above the peak of Mount Li. It was shining with a faint white light and emitting an extremely powerful aura. Even though they were far apart, Huanglong Daoist could feel a huge pressure. He brought the 2 elders across the sky to the north of the peak of the mountain and observed the black warship from a close distance. With his eyesight and knowledge, he couldn't recognize what kind of flying boat it was. Even the words, pictures, and flags on the flying boat were unfamiliar to him. However, that powerful and heavy pressure still lingered in his heart, giving him a bad premonition. At this moment, the warship slowly turned around and aimed its left side at the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. Caw caw caw. With a series of crisp sounds, the metal plate on the black warship opened up, revealing a row of holes. Every hole was as thick as a water bucket. Inside the holes, there were dark red dots of light. Huanglong Daoist and the 2 elders frowned. They were filled with doubts. The guards gathered from all directions, as well as a large number of disciples, frowned as they observed the warship. They started to whisper to each other. None of them had seen this warship before. They didn't know its power or use. However, everyone knew that the heavenly dome array left behind by Grandmaster Kenshin protected the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. No matter what kind of monster came, they could forget about invading the Pillar of Heaven Mountains. In the next moment, an earth-shattering explosion that sounded like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven suddenly exploded in the sky. Boom! On the left side of the black warship, the row of dark red holes suddenly shot out hundreds of dark red light pillars. They shot towards the Pillar of Heaven Mountains like lightning. Before anyone could react, the hundreds of dark red pillars of light slammed into the grand formation in the sky. Kaboom! Amidst the earth-shattering sound, a dazzling silver shield with a radius of 500 miles appeared. This silver shield that covered the sky was like a huge canopy. It was like an indestructible fortress that enveloped the entire Pillar of Heaven Mountains. The light shield was semicircular and was about a foot thick. It was formed by the condensation of bright starlight. It emitted a vast, cold, and mysterious aura. Obviously, the heavenly dome array was activated when the Pillar of Heaven Mountains was attacked. Even though the heavenly dome array was powerful, the silver light shield's defense was very strong. However, after being hit by the hundreds of dark red light pillars, the entire silver light shield shook violently. Layers of silver light rippled. Chapter 22:43. Originally, only half of the disciples and guards had heard the dangerous sound of the horn. There were only about 300 people who had gathered in the sky to observe the battleship. However, after the heavenly dome array was bombarded by the battleship, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Most of the people were awakened. Other than those who were in seclusion and could not come out, almost everyone rushed out. Everyone was filled with doubts and worries. They rushed out of their houses and palaces anxiously and gathered in the open space and in the sky. Even the servants and odd-job workers were anxious and ran out to check the situation. After a while, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains stopped shaking and gradually calmed down. Everyone looked around and saw that the ground on the peak of the mountain had cracked open. The tiles of many houses had fallen to the ground and were broken into pieces. The dojo on the peak of the mountain was shining with a bright silver light. The jade-paved ground was lit up with dense array patterns. Obviously, the heavenly dome array was operating at full power to support the silver light shield and protect the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Many disciples and guards had drawn their swords and sabers. They looked angrily at the battleship in the sky and roared angrily. "What the hell is that? How dare it attack our protective mountain array? Who dares to be so presumptuous in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Are you tired of living? Coward who hides his head but shows his tail. How dare he not show himself? Everyone, don't panic. Listen to the orders of the elders and the great immortal. We will definitely annihilate the enemy." Although the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was suddenly attacked and caused a huge commotion, the disciples were not afraid. However, the disciples were not afraid. Instead, they were filled with righteous indignation. Everyone was furious and murderous. They could not wait to rush out of the protective mountain array and attack the black battleship. Huanglong Daoist stood in the sky and stared at the battleship with a gloomy look. He felt that something was amiss. A few other elders hurried over and gathered around him, whispering into each other's ears. "Great Immortal, which force is that flying ship from? Why would they attack our sect for no reason? Great Immortal, should we rush out of the protective mountain array and launch a counterattack?" Huanglong Daoist thought for a while and nodded slightly. The other party is aggressive and the Dharma treasure they used is very strange. Its power is extraordinary. Although the heavenly dome array can protect the sect, we cannot hide in the array. Otherwise, the sect's prestige will be tarnished. The few of you, follow me. I would like to see who dares to behave so atrociously here. Then, Huanglong Daoist held his golden horsetail whisk and led the 4 elders out of the protective mountain array. And flew towards the black battleship. Shwa! 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 In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them were high up in the sky, stopping 1,000 zhang away from the battleship. Huang Long stared at the battleship with a piercing gaze. With a voice as loud as a bell, he shouted, "Who dares to invade the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Tell me your name." The rolling sound waves were like muffled thunder, reverberating in the sky. However, the black battleship did not respond. No one appeared, and no one answered. After about 10 breaths, the hundreds of dark holes on the left side of the ship lit up with a dark red brilliance. Seeing this, Huanglong Daoist's face suddenly changed. He quickly shouted, "Get out of the way." The elders also knew how powerful it was. They dodged without hesitation and immediately moved 10 miles away. In the next moment, the hundreds of dark holes burst out with a dazzling dark red light. Boom! With a deafening loud sound, hundreds of dark red light pillars gushed out and hit the silver light shield. Kaboom! Another loud sound that shook the 9 heavens exploded and spread thousands of miles away. The huge silver light shield was smashed into pieces and started to distort and sway. A destructive shockwave spread out in all directions. Huanglong Daoist and the 4 elders were swept away by the shock wave and were sent flying far away. The 4 elders were relatively weak. They were all bleeding from their 7 orifices and almost fainted. Only Huanglong Daoist, who was a martial sage, could withstand the power of the shock wave and was only slightly injured. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains was also hit and trembled violently. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, and cracks also appeared on the surrounding cliffs, causing countless rocks to fall down. Even though the silver light shield had blocked the attack of the dark red light beam and shattered the light beam into fiery fragments that filled the sky. However, the surface of the silver light shield was also covered with dense cracks, like a spider web. There was no doubt that if the silver light shield was hit 2 more times, it would be broken on the spot. Inside the protective formation, countless disciples were shaken and fell to the ground miserably. Everyone looked up at the sky and saw the cracks on the silver light shield. They were shocked and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Our mountain-protecting grand array was actually blasted apart. How is this possible? That black flying boat is actually so powerful. It's over. Once the protective mountain array is broken, who can protect us? That flying ship's power is too terrifying. If not for the protective mountain array, the entire sacred city would have been destroyed." In an instant, everyone's hearts were clenched and filled with fear and worry. After all, the most powerful Huanglong Daoist and the 4 elders were injured by the shock wave before they could even see who it was. At such a critical moment, no one knew how to deal with it. At this moment, the black battleship turned around and aimed its right side at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Ka ka ka. The black cover on the side of the battleship opened and revealed a row of crossbow cannons. Those crossbow cannons were all made of metal and there was a powerful array at the base. There were 3 feet long silver spears inserted. Each spear was as thick as the mouth of a bowl and was made of silver metal. They shone with silver-white starlight. Once these spears hit their targets, they would explode with terrifying power and destroy everything within a 1,000-mile radius. These were the star crossbows. The 3 feet long crossbow arrows were made of star mithril and the array at the base was also a sacred array that could continuously absorb the power of the stars. Even a martial sage would not dare to take the attack of the star crossbows head-on. Otherwise, they would die. Huanglong Daoist and the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had never seen the star crossbows before and did not know the power of these weapons. But when they were pointed at by the star crossbows, they instantly felt a sharp killing intent and a chill ran down their spines. No one doubted that when the hundreds of crossbow arrows shot over, the heavenly dome array, which was full of cracks, would be destroyed. The hundreds of crossbow cannons lit up at the same time and were crazily accumulating power. They were about to fire. At this moment, a golden light flew out from the pillar of heaven's palace and streaked across the sky like lightning. It came to the center of the dojo and landed on the huge sword steel. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. He was Ji Tianqing. Chapter 2244. Ji Tianqing's various legendary deeds had already spread across the entire continent. Even the rumor that he was the reincarnation of Kenshin was widely spread across the three kingdoms. The disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had all heard of this news. In the past few years, Ji Tianqing was rarely seen and was often not at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Therefore, no one had thought of him just now. Now that he had appeared, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They now had a backbone and someone to rely on. In everyone's eyes, he was omnipotent and was best at breaking the impossible and creating miracles. He would definitely take care of that strange black battleship in the sky. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on Ji Tianqing. They were full of anticipation. Ji Tianqing stood proudly on the sword steel. His face was solemn as he stretched out both of his hands and formed a mysterious hand seal with a profound technique. Swoosh! 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 More than 60 starlight seals were injected into the sword steel and transmitted to the entire dojo. Suddenly, the jade ground within 100 miles radiated even more dazzling starlight. Buzz! The mountain protection array that enveloped the entire Pillar of Heaven's mountains also emitted dazzling starlight and sped up. The cracks on the silver light shield also disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the black battleship lit up with dazzling silver light. Swoosh! 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 Over 100 star crossbows were fired at the same time. Dense silver light beams shot towards the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Each streak of silver light was a 10-meter-long star mithril crossbow arrow that contained the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Bang! 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 Over 100 star crossbow arrows hit the silver light shield at the same time. There was an earth-shattering sound that reverberated through the 9 heavens. The sound shook the heavens and spread across a radius of 10,000 miles. The clear sky was also shattered, and countless pitch-black cracks appeared in the void. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, sweeping away all the white clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. The silver light shield shook violently. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains also trembled and made muffled rumbling sounds. The dazzling brilliance of the stars obscured the sky for thousands of miles, so dazzling that no one could open their eyes. Such an earth-shattering commotion caused the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to be dumbfounded. Their hearts were filled with anxiety. Fortunately, the silver light barrier was not broken. After a long time, the silver light that blotted out the sky gradually dissipated. The gigantic silver light barrier and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains also gradually stopped trembling. Everything returned to normal. Everyone looked up at the sky again and saw that Ji Tianqing had already flown out of the protective formation. He was flying high up in the sky, carrying an old man covered in blood in each hand. Everyone took a closer look and saw that they were 2 severely injured elders who had already fainted from the shock. Shwa! Ji Tianqing carried the 2 elders and flew back into the silver light barrier. Huanglong Daoist brought the other 2 severely injured elders and hurriedly greeted him. Ji Tianqing handed the 2 unconscious elders to Huanglong Daoist and instructed, "Send them to treat their injuries. Without my orders, no one is allowed to leave the protective formation." Huanglong Daoist hurriedly took the 2 elders and handed them to the guards behind him. He looked at Ji Tianqing worriedly and asked through voice transmission, "Master, who is that guy? Why don't they show up?" Ji Tianqing glanced at the battleship and said coldly, "They are foreign race experts from the depths of the starry sky. 2 months ago, they wandered into the North Underworld mountain and seized a large territory. Now, they have actually killed their way to the pillar of heaven's mountains. If I'm not wrong, they are probably colluding with the demon race. Huanglong Daoist suddenly understood and cursed angrily, they are actually foreign races from other worlds. No wonder they don't dare to show up. Their methods are so strange. In fact, Ji Tianqing had seen countless foreign race experts, deities, and all kinds of strange battleships when he traveled across the galaxy. Only battleships were the most suitable magic treasures for traveling through the starry sky. Not to mention the black battleship in the sky, he had even seen a lot of real divine battleships. He was used to it. However, Huanglong Daoist had never left the world of 5 elements. He could not imagine what the outside world was like. Ji Tianqing did not explain too much. He ordered Huanglong Daoist, Huanglong, gather all the disciples and work together to operate the Sky Dome Array to protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I will personally meet those foreign races. After saying that, he took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and flew into the sky in a flash to confront the black battleship. Huanglong Daoist was worried, but he did not dare to disobey the order. He hurriedly ordered all the elders, deacons, and disciples to gather at the training ground. A large number of guards and disciples received the order and immediately rushed to the training ground from all directions at the fastest speed. Everyone followed a special order and position and arranged themselves in a hexagram formation on the training ground. They worked together to release a vast amount of magic power and injected it into the Sky Dome Array. Suddenly, the silver light shield that enveloped the Pillar of Heaven's mountains became brighter and more powerful. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky and looked coldly at the black battleship. His left hand was behind his back and his right hand was holding the Sword of Burial of Heaven. His whole body was filled with battle intent and killing intent. The black battleship stopped attacking temporarily. At the front of the battleship, a black door opened. A non-humankind guard, who was wearing a black armor and had 3 dark golden patterns on his chest, walked out on his 4 hooves. He stood on the observation deck at the front of the battleship and looked at Ji Tianqing sharply. When he saw Ji Tianqing's face clearly, his face instantly changed, revealing a look of great astonishment. "You! Why are you here?" This person was shocked and could not help but exclaim. Moreover, he was speaking in a broken demon language. When Ji Tianqing saw this person clearly, he frowned and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. "The leader of the guards under you? When did you learn the demon language?" In order to make the other party understand, Ji Tianqing also used the demon language. The leader of the guards then regained his senses and smiled coldly. He said slowly, "Looks like you are the leader of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the archenemy of the demon race, Ji Tianqing." Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "That's right, I am Ji Tianqing, the person you are looking for." The leader of the guards laughed even more and said in a mocking tone, "Previously in the starry sky, you were lucky to escape with your life. I did not expect to meet you here today. Maybe this is the will of the heavens. You are destined to die under my sword." Ji Tianqing looked at him indifferently and said in a disdainful tone, "You don't have the right to say that. Ask your master, and you, to come out." The leader of the guards frowned and said coldly, "Kid, you are really arrogant. However, you are just a small martial saint. I can easily kill you." Chapter 22:45. The guard captain's words were ambiguous and he did not reveal any information about Anu. However, after Ji Tianqing heard this, he knew what was going on, and the corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. "Hee, it seems that Anu has underestimated me. He thinks that I am just an ordinary martial sage. He does not know that I am the one who fought with him in the illusionary spirit Star Corps. Therefore, he only sent his guard captain here. He knew clearly that with Anu's status and arrogance, how could he not show up if he came here personally? How could he allow the guard captain to show off his strength here?" He stared coldly at the guard captain and sneered, "Since Anu is not here, all of you shall stay here." None of you shall go back alive. As soon as he finished speaking, his body shone with a dazzling golden light. His body expanded to 10 feet tall and he looked like a god of war in golden armor. Heaven-breaking sword. He formed a sword sign with his left hand and held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. He slashed out a giant star sword that was thousands of feet long. Suddenly, the dazzling starlight lit up the sky and turned everything within a few hundred miles white. The giant star sword slashed toward the guard captain with a force that could split the sky and earth. The guard captain had seen how powerful Yu was. His face changed and he looked fearful. He pulled out his long saber and slashed out a dark red saber radiance toward the giant star sword. Kaboom! Amidst deafening noises, the dozens of dark red saber auras were cut apart by the star sword and exploded into thousands of pieces. The giant star sword's power was not reduced at all. It was still dazzling and it hit the black warship. Suddenly, the huge warship was pushed back more than 10 miles. It rolled a few times before it came to a stop. The star sword was shattered, but only a shallow dent was left on the pitch-black warship. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and muttered with a gloomy expression, "Damn it. This warship has surpassed the sacred class and reached the divine class. Is this Yu's warship?" With his current strength, it was impossible for him to break a divine class magic weapon. At this moment, the guard captain flew over from 20 miles away and charged towards Su Mo furiously. "Ji Tianqing. Give me your life." His voice was like muffled thunder as dark red flames surged in his eyes. He waved his long saber and slashed out 3 shocking saber lights. Ji Tianqing looked at him coldly. He swung the sword of burial of heaven again and slashed out a few more starry swords. 7-star sword. Bang 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 bang. The 700-meter-long stellar swords collided with the dark red saber light with a deafening boom. The saber light collapsed on the spot, scattering fiery fragments all over the sky. However, there were still 4-star swords left. They all struck the guard captain and sent him flying back. He tumbled for 20 miles before stabilizing himself and stopping in midair. Lowering his head, he saw a hideous wound on his chest, abdomen, and left front hoof. Blood kept flowing out of the wound. A piercing pain came, causing the captain's face to twist. His eyes were filled with shock. "In just over 2 months, your strength has actually increased by several times." The guard captain growled in disbelief. He looked at Ji Tianqing as if he had seen a ghost. Ji Tianqing sneered and said, "Since you understand, why don't you come and accept your death?" As he spoke, he turned into a stream of light and rushed toward the guard captain, waving his sword again. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. He used the 9 swords of burial of heaven and slashed out hundreds of sword lights in one breath. He swore to kill the guard captain on the spot. The guard captain was tired of resisting. He waved his long saber crazily and slashed out saber lights all over the sky. However, he still couldn't stop the sword lights. With a series of muffled bangs, he was sent flying by the sword lights again. A few more hideous wounds appeared on his tall and sturdy body, and blood kept gushing out. After the two of them exchanged a few moves, he was forced to retreat more than 100 miles by Ji Tianqing. His left front hoof was also chopped off. His injuries were miserable and he looked very miserable. Seeing this, the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains cheered excitedly and cheered for Ji Tianqing. The black battleship released the star crossbow again and attacked the mountain guarding formation. At the same time, 4 guards in black armor rushed out from the black door of the battleship and attacked Ji Tianqing. After the 4 guards joined the battle, the pressure on the guard captain was greatly reduced. He finally had a chance to catch his breath and quickly used the dark red light to heal his injuries. After he temporarily suppressed his injuries, he recovered his long saber and joined the battle. He joined forces with the 4 guards to attack Ji Tianqing. The 2 sides fought fiercely in the sky, constantly producing deafening explosions and dazzling lights. The remaining 4 guards stayed in the battleship. They were in charge of controlling the array of the battleship. They took turns to release the star crossbow and the dark red light beam to attack the mountain guarding formation. On the dojo at the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the Huanglong Daoist and thousands of disciples poured their energy into the mountain guarding formation and tried their best to support it. Every time the star crossbow and the dark red light beam hit the mountain guarding formation, there would be an earth-shattering explosion. However, the power of the mountain guarding formation was endless. The silver light shield was constantly being repaired and it was not broken. The 2 sides were in a stalemate. They wanted to see who could last until the end. Soon, 15 minutes passed. The battleship released more than 80 attacks, but it was still unable to break the mountain guarding formation. The Huanglong Daoist and thousands of disciples were exhausted. Their faces were pale and they were covered in cold sweat. However, they did not dare to relax. They all gritted their teeth and tried their best to hold on. On the other side, in the sky 300 miles away from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the fight between Ji Tianqing and the guards was finally coming to an end. In this 15 minutes, the 2 sides had exchanged more than 1,000 moves. 2 of the guards were seriously injured. Their limbs and heads had been chopped off and they were almost exhausted. They did not manage to dodge Ji Tianqing's unique swordsmanship. The scales on their chests were shattered by the sword of the burial of heaven and they died on the spot. The other 2 outsider guards were also severely injured, just like their captain. Their hooves and arms were chopped off, and one of them had his head smashed into pieces. However, they were still alive. Their vitality was so strong that it made one's hair stand on end. Ji Tianqing knew that these people were very strange. The power they cultivated was very special. Their bodies were strong but they did not have divine souls. Their fatal weakness was the dark red scales on their chests. The dark golden patterns on it probably represented their strength, realm, or status. The 2 sides exchanged a few more moves. Ji Tianqing slashed out sword radiance and forced the 3 of them to retreat. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he raised his left hand without hesitation and released a bright golden divine flame. God-slaying spear. Chapter 2246. Bang! There was a muffled explosion. The god-slaying spear pierced through the chest of the headless alien guard and his body exploded on the spot. It was like a ball of dark red fire that bloomed in the sky. Thousands of sparks fell from the sky and then gradually dissipated. The strange thing was that the 30-meter-long dark golden divine spear did not dissipate. Under the control of Ji Tianqing, the dark golden spear changed its direction and pierced towards another black-armored guard. Swish! With a flash of golden light, the spear traveled thousands of feet in an instant. Its speed was faster than lightning. This black-armored guard was severely injured and weak. He did not have time to dodge or block the attack. Bang! Another muffled sound rang out. The dark golden divine spear pierced through his chest, shattering the dark red scale armor into pieces. Even his body exploded with a bang, turning into a rain of flesh and blood that rained down from the sky. Only then did the light of the dark golden spear dim and gradually dissipate. Ji Tianqing only used one secret skill to kill 2 black-armored guards. Such a scene caused the guard captain to be filled with shock. His eyes were filled with intense fear. The last bit of fighting spirit that remained in his heart also vanished into thin air. Swish! He turned around and ran without hesitation. Stimulated by the desire to live, he flew towards the black battleship at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, he was like a beam of red light that crossed 80 miles in the sky and rushed to the black battleship. Caw caw caw. The black door at the front of the battleship opened. The captain of the guards could not wait to rush in. At this moment, a starry sword light flew from afar and struck the captain of the guards at the door like lightning. At this critical moment, the captain of the guards held the long saber with both hands and slashed at the starry sword light without caring about anything. Bang! With a loud bang, the starry sword broke into pieces and scattered starlight all over the sky. The captain of the guard's long saber was knocked away. He spat out blood and flew back. He crashed into the interior of the battleship and made muffled sounds. With a loud clang, the black door finally closed. Ji Tianqing teleported from afar but was blocked outside the battleship. He frowned and raised the sword of burial of heaven with a grim expression. Then, he slashed down with all his might. God-slaying sword. The burial of heaven sword glowed with a mysterious black light and instantly expanded to several hundred feet long. It fiercely slashed out a 3,000 feet long dark golden sword. Clang! The giant sword carried the power to slay gods and exterminate demons as it struck the battleship with a loud bang that shook the heavens and the earth. In that instant, the sword of burial of heaven trembled incessantly and emitted waves of mournful cries. The dark golden sword shattered inch by inch into millions of fragments that blotted out the sky. The battleship descended from the sky as well, smashing violently against the foot of a mountain 100 miles away, then smashed into the ground along with a loud boom. The mountain peak 100 miles away collapsed on the spot, turning into ruins. The ground, which was covered with grass and forests, was also smashed into a crater with a radius of dozens of miles by the battleship. Dust and smoke rose into the air. Within 1,000 miles, the ground trembled violently. The mountains shook incessantly, and many ravines cracked open. It was as if a super earthquake had erupted. The ground cracked and caved in one after another, producing loud, muffled rumbling sounds. Such terrifying power and momentum was like the wrath of a god. However, the black battleship was abnormally sturdy. Its defense was so powerful that it left one speechless. Only a palm-wide groove was left on the black metal surface of the battleship. It was 8,000 feet long and half a foot deep. Unfortunately, the black metal was not cut open. The captain of the guards and the 4 non-human guards hiding in the battleship were only dizzy from the impact. They did not suffer any substantial damage. After a while, the battleship flew out of the crater shakily, shaking off countless amounts of soil. Then, with a whoosh, it shot into the sky and fled toward the north. The battleship turned into a black streak of light. It was as fast as lightning and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a while. He looked at the sword of burial of heaven in his hand. In the end, he did not chase after the battleship. He stood in the dust-filled sky, looking at the horizon in the north. His face was grim as he murmured, "It is a pity that the sword of burial of heaven has not recovered to the divine grade. It is still unable to fight against a divine grade weapon. With my strength, I still cannot break the defense of a divine grade weapon. When the sword of burial of heaven recovers to the divine grade, I will definitely cut and use battleship in half." As soon as he finished speaking, the voice of the sword of burial of heaven resounded in his mind. Ouch! My old waist. This is so infuriating. Hurry up and think of a way to help me recover to the divine grade as soon as possible. When that time comes, won't it be like chopping vegetables for me to deal with that broken battleship? We could have killed them, but we could only watch them escape. This is too depressing. Ji Tianqing lowered his head and looked at the sword of burial of heaven. He reached out and touched the cold blade. He said in a low voice, "Don't worry. It won't be long before you get what you want." With that, he waved his hand and shot the sword of burial of heaven out. It turned into a ray of light and flew back into the sword steel at the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. Only in the sword steel, with the help of the heavenly array, could the sword of burial of heaven recover quickly. After that, Ji Tianqing stepped into the air and returned to the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains. He came to the center of the training hall and stood at the top of the sword steel. He looked down at the disciples in the training hall. The Huanglong Daoist, many elders, deacons, and disciples were all sweating profusely. They looked exhausted. However, everyone's face was filled with an expression as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. That battleship was terrifyingly powerful, but everyone worked together to support the array and block the attack of the battleship. Moreover, Ji Tianqing fought alone and killed 4 foreign race experts. He even repelled the battleship. This was a victory that lifted everyone's spirits and filled them with pride. Ji Tianqing's gaze swept across the entire training hall. He said in a dignified and loud voice, "In the past 1,000 years, our sect has been invaded and attacked by countless forces. It's a pity that our sect could not unite and fight against the enemies together. Therefore, our sect's strength has been damaged and weakened over and over again. But today, everyone's performance is very good. I am very gratified and very satisfied. Whether it is now or in the future, I hope that the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains can unite and fight against the enemies together. Only in this way can we stand at the peak of martial arts and continue to be glorious forever." The thunderous sound waves rolled across the training hall, shaking everyone's heart and soul. Everyone present couldn't help but raise their heads and puff out their chests, revealing a face full of pride and determination. Everyone's blood was boiling and they were excited. They all looked at Ji Tianqing in awe. At this moment, almost all of the disciples could deeply feel what the honor of the sect was, and what the belief of martial arts was. After that, Ji Tianqing ordered the disciples to go back and rest. The Huanglong Daoist, elders, and deacons also had to treat the injured and deal with the aftermath. Ji Tianqing stayed behind and personally inspected the heavenly dome array. He repaired and improved the damaged areas. He had made up his mind to connect the star divine furnace and the heavenly dome array. This would increase the power of the heavenly dome array by 3 times. This was because he had a premonition that today's incident was just the beginning. Chapter 2247. A day later, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains regained its peace. None of the disciples were injured, but they had used up too much of their magic power, so they were all cultivating. The broken ground on the mountain peak, many of the houses and palaces that had fallen were also repaired by the craftsmen. Only the 4 elders who were seriously injured would have to go into seclusion to recuperate for a few more months. Other than that, everything was back to normal and orderly. Ji Tianqing and Huanglong Daoist started to get busy. The 2 of them had to work together to set up a few sacred grade arrays. 2 of the sacred arrays were to strengthen the defense, while the other 2 were to support the heavenly array. This was a huge and tedious project that would take at least 10 days to complete. Furthermore, it would consume a huge amount of spiritual stones and resources. Luckily, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was getting more and more prosperous. There was some surplus in the treasury, enough for Ji Tianqing to set up a few arrays. 10 days later, the 4 sacred arrays were set up. Ji Tianqing spent another day to connect the star divine furnace and the heavenly array. In this way, the heavenly dipper and earthly terminus arrays formed by the 108 mountain peaks within the Pillar of Heaven's mountains continuously supplied energy to the star divine furnace. And the star divine furnace also supplied energy to the heavenly array, so that the heavenly array would never run out of energy. Unless someone could destroy the heavenly dipper and earthly terminus arrays, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and become an indestructible fortress. Even if the martial god came personally, he might not be able to break through the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. After dealing with the defensive array, Ji Tianqing entered the star divine furnace again. After the warship bombarded the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he felt that the situation was critical and the pressure was increasing. He only wanted to smelt the illusionary spirit star core as soon as possible, and then use the 9th heaven cauldron in the divine weapon pavilion to help the sword of burial of heaven become a divine weapon. Only when the sword of burial of heaven becomes a divine weapon, would he be qualified to fight against Yu and the ancestral demon god. What made him feel gratified was that Qian Yu and the Black Dragon did not slack off. They had both mastered the technique that he gave them and were concentrating on smelting the illusionary spirit star core. After more than a month of smelting, the illusionary spirit star core was obviously smaller, and it was only 180 miles long. The surface of the originally pitch-black stellar core also lit up with a silver light, and it was recovering its luster. Ji Tianqing encouraged Qian Yu and the Black Dragon. Then, he personally cast a secret technique to refine the star core. Even though he estimated that he would only need 3 years to successfully smelt the star core, he still couldn't do anything about it. However, he couldn't wait any longer. 3 years was still too long. If there was a miracle, he really hoped that the star core would be successfully smelted tomorrow. In the southern part of Dark North Mountain. In the 100 origin city of the Jingshan region. In the majestic and dignified city lord's mansion, and Yu's study. He was standing by the window, looking out with a gloomy expression. In the study, the black-armored guard captain stood respectfully, not daring to even breathe loudly. The guard captain's left front leg and right rear leg had been chopped off, leaving only 2 legs on the ground. It looked particularly comical. Previously, when he had fled back to 100 Origin City, his injuries had been even worse, and he was in an extremely sorry state. After 10 days of recuperation, his injuries had stabilized, and he had recovered 60% of his strength. After a long silence, Yu spoke in the strange tribe's language and muttered to himself in a low voice, "I never thought that the leader of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain, Ji Tianqing, who killed millions of demon tribesmen, would be that guy. In just 2 months, his strength has increased by several times. It is a miracle. No wonder Ling Xian asked me to kill Ji Tianqing before agreeing to cooperate. That guy is indeed extraordinary. He is only a martial sage, but he is invincible among the martial sages. I only hate that I didn't take him seriously back then and actually let him escape with his life. If I had killed him on the spot at the illusory spirit star core, none of this would have happened." The guard captain hurriedly lowered his head and said with a voice full of self-blame, "My lord, I underestimated the enemy and caused the failure of the mission. I even lost 4 guards. Fortunately, I steered your Wolf Fong battleship and managed to escape alive. Now that we know Ji Tianqing's background, we will definitely not fail the next time we take action." And Yu shook his head and revealed a cold smile. He said in a low voice, "No, since we have already failed once, we cannot rashly attack a second time. Ling Xian is despicable and wants to use us to help him eliminate a strong enemy. He wants to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only can he get rid of Ji Tianqing, but he can also weaken our strength." The guard captain understood what Yu meant and nodded. "That's right. We are short on manpower, and we only have 80 guards. We cannot sacrifice them so easily. Every death of a guard is a great loss to us. My lord, what do you plan to do next? Are we just going to ignore the Pillar of Heaven's mountain?" And Yu shook his head again and said in a low voice, "Of course not. I want the 72 cities and the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. Especially the Pillar of Heaven's mountain. I have been flipping through the history of the Shenwu continent recently, and I discovered something very interesting. The founder of the Pillar of Heaven's mountain was the strongest person on the continent more than 1,000 years ago, and he was known as Kenshin. Furthermore, this world has been sealed by the gods, and no one has been able to ascend for tens of thousands of years. Only Kenshin managed to ascend to the god realm. But for some reason, Kenshin fell 1,000 years ago. Ji Tianqing, who now controls the Pillar of Heaven's mountain, is rumored to be Kenshin's reincarnation, which is why he is so monstrous." The guard captain frowned, and his expression became very strange. "This world has been sealed by the gods. No wonder there is a golden barrier on the surface of the planet that prevents us from entering. But why is this world sealed? Ascending to the God realm is extremely tempting to the people of this world. But to us, this is not attractive at all. And you revealed a meaningful smile and said in a playful tone, "That's right. To the heaven crushers, the universe is like the ocean, and we are the hunters who fight against the wind and waves. As long as one's strength surpasses the void God realm, one can successfully ascend to the God realm. But to the people of this world, no matter how strong they are, they will never be able to ascend. Think about it, if I could show them a path and give them a chance to ascend to the God realm, they would be grateful to me. Tell me, do you think they would be so grateful that they would be willing to serve me?" Hearing this, the guard captain had a sudden realization, and his eyes shone brightly. "That's right. Sir, you are too brilliant. The powerhouses of this world have not been able to ascend for tens of thousands of years, and they do not know the situation of the God realm. They have an incomparable desire to ascend. If you can make use of this, you will be able to achieve great things." He. And you laughed coldly and said in a playful tone, "This world is very special, and it is much more interesting than the other worlds that we have conquered. I have decided to completely occupy this world and plunder all of its resources so that I can study its mysteries." He paused for a moment, and his tone became awe-inspiring as he continued, "However, this plan needs to be carried out gradually, and it cannot be rushed." Chapter 22:48. 2 hours later. And you boarded the Wolf Fong battleship with 8 black-armored guards. Whoosh! The giant battleship flew out of the governor's manor and headed north at lightning speed. On the way to Beiming Palace, 4 guards were in charge of steering the ship. And you sat in a cold, austere room made of black iron. He held 2 ancient books in his hands and quietly flipped through them. The ancient book in his right hand was a brief history of Shenwu continent written in the demon language. As for the ancient book in his left hand, it was an extremely common book written in the demon language. Only the children of the demon race would learn this book when they first learned how to read. And you had wandered the universe for many years, conquering and plundering many large worlds along the way. He had accumulated a wealth of experience. Conquering and plundering a world was not enough to rely on brute force alone. He still needed to study and research this world's history and foundation. In the 3 months since he had entered the 5-elemental world, aside from conquering, killing, and conquering territories, he had spent all his time studying and researching Shenwu continent. His starting point was to learn the demon language and writing. With his experience, strength, and intelligence, he had already grasped the basics of the demon language and had a rough understanding of Shenwu continent. This was why the Heaven Punishers were so terrifying. Not only did they have an extremely strong life force and combat power, but they also had a learning ability that other races could not hope to achieve. Half a day later, the Wolf Fong battleship flew across a wasteland and arrived at the peak of the Divine Mountain. The battleship stopped above Beiming Palace and floated motionlessly in the air. The captain of the guards walked into the room and respectfully reported to Enyu, "Sir, we have arrived." Enyu nodded and stored the 2 ancient books in his spatial ring. He stood up and straightened his dark red cloak. His hand was on the hilt of his sword as he stepped out of the battleship. When he landed in the plaza outside Beiming Palace with his 2 guards, Ling Xian and the other demon generals were already waiting for him. Ling Xian hurriedly greeted him and cupped his fists with a smile. "Sir Enyu, we had a face-to-face discussion not long ago. What is it that you have to personally come here today?" Enyu's face was tense, and his expression and gaze were sinister. He coldly replied, "What? You don't seem to welcome me. Or, are you feeling guilty?" Ling Xian's heart skipped a beat. He naturally understood that Enyu was referring to something else. However, his expression did not change. He maintained his smile and pretended to be puzzled. "Lord Enyu seems to be in a bad mood. So be it. As a sincere ally, I certainly have to give my ally comfort and care at this time." "Lord Enyu, please enter the main hall for a chat. Ling Xian pretended that he didn't know what was going on. He put on a smile and didn't seem to be angry at all. Instead, it made Yu feel even more disgusted and even more wary of him. In just a few encounters, Yu understood that Ling Xian's thoughts were vicious, and his actions were treacherous and despicable. He stood out among the demon race experts. No wonder the ancestral devil god gave him the authority. Yu suppressed his anger for the time being and followed Ling Xian into the meeting hall. After both of them were seated, Yu was too lazy to talk nonsense with Ling Xian. He went straight to the point. I was full of sincerity when I cooperated with you, but you schemed against me and deliberately concealed information about Tianzhu Mountain and Ji Tianqing. Ling Xian, you don't have to put on an act with me. I have already seen through your thoughts. Ji Tianqing seems to be the reincarnation of Kenshin. He is now the strongest person below the martial god realm. Other than a god realm expert, no one can kill him. Since Yu had exposed the truth and talked about the important matter without hiding anything, Ling Xian could no longer be vague. He kept his smile and said solemnly, Lord Yu, I didn't mean to conceal anything. Moreover, the information that I gave you was absolutely true. Ji Tianqing is indeed only a martial sage. He is also the enemy of my tribe. You sent a few guards to attack Tianzhu Mountain in a battleship. In the end, they failed miserably. I have also heard the news. As for the deaths of the few guards, I am deeply sorry and regretful. However, you can only blame yourself for underestimating your enemy and not attacking personally. It has nothing to do with my tribe. If you had attacked Tianzhu Mountain personally, Ji Tianqing would have been executed by now and we could have immediately started working together to conquer the world. He. And you sneered and said in a mocking tone, what? Now that you've failed the mission, you're trying to push all the blame onto this seat. Since that is the case, we have nothing to talk about. I don't want to think about the 72 cities and Tianzhu Mountain for now. I think North Sea Mountain is not bad. Especially this holy mountain and North Sea Palace. I like them very much. Hearing this, Ling Xian's face changed. He frowned and said, Lord Yu, you can't joke about this. You should know that my tribe is sincere. Seeing Yu's cold smile, Ling Xian gritted his teeth and said, all right, I won't talk nonsense. Lord Yu, what do you want in return? Only then did Yu put away his sneer and said in a serious tone, I can kill Ji Tianqing myself, but you will have to pay 3 times the price. I will not give up the 5 regions in the south. The 72 cities and Tianzhu Mountain will still belong to Maine. Also, you must gather 1,000,000 demon warriors for me. I want the best of them. Ling Xian furrowed his brows and shouted without hesitation, impossible. Lord Yu, you are asking for too much. You are too overbearing. This is just a small lesson for you. Yu sneered and said, I am sincere about cooperating with you, but you are playing tricks. You can't blame anyone. Ling Xian shook his head again and said firmly, Lord Yu, you are forcing me. Please forgive me for not agreeing. Yu did not back down and said, this only shows that you are not sincere at all. The two of them were in a stalemate, neither of them willing to back down. The negotiation was in a stalemate. The atmosphere in the hall was almost frozen. However, at this moment, a voice transmission suddenly sounded in Ling Xian's mind. Master, that bitch has shown herself. It was a low and hoarse voice. It was cold and full of murderous intent. Ling Xian knew that this was his most trusted and most hidden trump card, Cang Ying. His body shook, and then the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. He sent a voice transmission to Cang Ying and ordered, take her down. I want to see what she's up to. After that, he stood up and saluted Yu. With a solemn expression, he said, Master Yu, please be patient and wait here for a moment. Chapter 22:49. Ling Xian was startled at first, then his lips curled into a cold smile. Then, he stood up and bid farewell, saying that he had something urgent to deal with. And you had been watching from the sidelines. He took in his expression and reaction. Seeing him stand up and leave, and you was too lazy to ask anything, he sat on the chair and pondered expressionlessly. This despicable bastard, it must be difficult for him to make a decision, so he went to ask the demon ancestor. But because he wanted to save face, he could not tell the truth, so he found this excuse. And you thought so, he hated Ling Xian's hypocrisy even more. Behind the conference hall. At the end of the corridor, there was a dark, small, and dirty secret room, which was used to store miscellaneous items. Normally, this secret room would be forgotten by others, and no one would notice it for a few months. Only the deacons in charge of internal affairs knew about the existence of this secret room. Also, as the deacon of internal affairs, Ku had been paying attention to the news of the foreign races. Half a month ago, she had suffered 50 soul lashes, she was almost dead, her mind was extremely weak, and she had been recuperating in her room. Today, her injuries had recovered a little, and her mental state was much better. But she received news that the leader of the foreign races, Anu, had come to Baiming Palace with the black battleship. She immediately realized that Anu had come to see the great demon sage personally, there must be something important to discuss. So, she ignored her injuries and sneaked into this small and dark secret room. She hid in the corner of the secret room, and with a little trick, she could eavesdrop on the conversation in the conference hall. She had also heard the argument between Ling Xian and Anu. Neither of them was willing to back down. The Pillar of Heaven's mountain had successfully blocked the attack of the battleship, and Ji Tianqing had killed a few foreign race guards, she was relieved and secretly happy. Originally, she held her breath and listened attentively, wanting to know the result. Would Anu and Ling Xian continue to work together? If the negotiation did not break down, what plan would they have next? But, something that Ku did not expect happened. Just as she was listening attentively, a black shadow silently appeared in the darkness behind her. Swoosh! This blurry human figure was like a shadow of a person. There was no flesh and blood body, nor was there any magic power fluctuation or soul aura. He came without a trace and left without a trace. The black shadow did not make a sound and directly struck out a pair of pitch-black dragon claws towards Ku. Ku sensed danger and subconsciously turned around. He waved his palms and sent out 2 bloody palm shadows. Bang bang! With a muffled sound, the 2 bloody palm shadows collapsed on the spot, smashed into pieces by the pair of pitch-black dragon claws. In the next instant, the pitch-black dragon claw enveloped Ku. The secret chamber was so small that Ku couldn't dodge at all. Next door was the great meeting hall, so it was best not to cause too much of a commotion. Otherwise, his identity would be exposed. Her heart was burning with anxiety as she desperately rushed to the side, trying to avoid the dragon's claws. However, her strength was simply too weak compared to that black shadow. There was no suspense in the outcome. She was immediately captured by the pitch-black dragon claw and held firmly in its palm. 5 sharp and cold claws locked her tightly, making it difficult for her to struggle or resist. Cold black gas surged out of the black claws and covered her body, making her unable to use her strength. Ku's expression changed drastically. Her dark red eyes flashed with anger and worry. However, she tried to maintain her composure and shouted at the black shadow, "Bastard, I am the internal affairs deacon, what are you doing? Let me go." The black shadow's eyes were like 2 dark red flames, staring straight at her. He said with a hoarse voice, "Not only do I know that you are the internal affairs deacon, I also know that your name is Ku. Furthermore, your whereabouts in the past few months have been strange. You have been secretly eavesdropping on the great demon saint's plans. You have bad intentions." Ku immediately frowned as a bad premonition arose in her heart. She thought to herself, damn it. This guy is secretly spying on me. Could it be that the great demon saint is already suspicious of me? Damn it. I have been very careful these past 2 years and have never exposed myself. It is only because of the appearance of the foreign race experts that I became anxious. At this time, the Black Shadow continued, oh right, my name is Tsang. I am Master's Shadow. You don't have to refute or explain yourself. If you have anything to say, just say it to Master. Tsang Ying's words confirmed Aku's guess. Her heart sank to the bottom, and her body turned cold. After a while, the stone door of the secret room opened. A tall and burly black shadow covered in dragon scales stepped into the secret room. The person who came was the great demon saint, Ling Xian. His face was filled with a cold smile, and his body was filled with cold killing intent. He stood in the middle of the secret room and looked at Aku with sharp eyes. He asked in a deep voice, Aku, tell me, why are you doing this? How could Aku admit it? She immediately suppressed the worry in her heart and revealed an expression as if she had seen her savior. She said anxiously, Great Demon Saint, you are finally here. Quickly tell Tsang Ying that this is a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Ling Xian grinned coldly and said in a playful tone, previously, you were too concerned about the foreign race and wanted to influence my decision. Now that an you has come to visit again, you are hiding here and secretly eavesdropping on the negotiations between me and an you. Tell me, who are you? Who do you work for? You are a smart person, and you should know my methods. If you know what is good for you, be honest. Otherwise, he. Aku hurriedly shook her head and explained anxiously, Great Demon Saint, Aku is innocent. You also know that Aku used to be a blood-robed guard and trained in the Blood Sea Abyss for 3 months. I will only be loyal to the demon race and the ancestor demon god. The reason why I am so concerned about the foreign race is also for the sake of the demon race. The foreign race experts have evil intentions and are full of ambition. They are definitely not good people. Our race cooperating with them is like asking a tiger for its skin. Not only will we be attacked by them, but we will also disappoint countless people. Speaking up to here, Ko revealed a sincere expression and said in a self-mocking tone, Great Demon Saint, you also know Aku's nature. I am good at guessing the intentions of my superiors and helping my master solve problems. Although Aku is the internal affairs deacon and cannot interfere with government affairs, I wholeheartedly protect the demon race and want to contribute to the demon race. Unfortunately, Aku is too concerned about this important matter and has made you doubt Aku's intentions. If Aku had known earlier, Aku would have been a useless internal affairs deacon waiting for death to earn your trust. Hearing her words, Ling Xian frowned and fell silent for a moment. He stared at Aku with a burning gaze and secretly used his divine sense to check the fluctuations of her spirit. For a moment, he almost believed Aku's words. However, he was cunning and suspicious by nature. After a moment of silence, he sneered and said, Aku, you really have a sharp tongue, unlike the other blood-robed guards. No matter what you say, this seat will not believe you. Tsang Ying, take her to the torture department and torture her. Chapter 2250. Aku was filled with anxiety and wanted to defend himself. But Ling Xian did not want to listen to her and waved his hand to give the order. Tsang Ying immediately took Aku out of the secret room and brought her to the torture department. At the same time, 2 groups of fierce-looking guards hurried to Aku's residence. The 3 rooms that were neither too big nor too small were soon turned upside down. In less than 15 minutes, the guards brought a large pile of boxes, books, and jade slips to Ling Xian. Ling Xian released his divine sense and scanned the messy pile of items. However, after 100 breaths, he withdrew his divine sense in disappointment. There was nothing unusual about these items. Even if the jade slips were strange, there was no conclusive evidence. Ling Xian could not help but frown and mumble to himself, is there really nothing wrong with her? Did I really misunderstand her? Not long after, a guard rushed over from afar and quickly reporting to Lord Devil Saint, there's news from the torture department. Ling Xian raised his eyebrows and asked, what news? The guard replied respectfully, Lord Songying sent Ah Ku to the torture department. After 3 types of torture, she was tortured so badly that she fainted. However, Lord Songying forcefully broke Ah Ku's space ring and found 2 communication jade slips. Lord Songying said that there's something strange about the 2 communication jade slips. You'll understand once you take a look. Hearing this, Ling Xian's eyes lit up and his lips curled into a cold smile. Ha ha ha. I guessed right. There's something wrong with that bitch. After saying this, he brought the guards and rushed to the torture department. The infamous torture department was located behind Beiming Palace, at the edge of the cliff of the Sacred Mountain. This was a huge black palace that looked like a skull. It sat on the edge of the cliff. The palace was built with huge black stones, and there were many blood-red flags on top of it, engraved with array patterns. The huge black door was the mouth of the skull. Those who were sent to the torture department were like being sent to the bloody mouth of a demon. The torture department was dark and gloomy. It was filled with the smell of blood and decay. Ling Xian passed through 2 dark corridors and arrived at a spacious prison cell. It was a cell with a radius of 100 meters. It was built with black boulders, and the walls were engraved with demonic carvings. There were a few blood-red gemstone lamps in the corners. As far as the eye could see, there were several rows of ferocious-looking torture instruments placed in the cell. On the innermost ground, there was a blood pool with blood-red flames boiling, emitting a nauseating smell of blood. On the eastern wall, there was a 10-meter-high altar. The base of the altar was made of skulls. There was a copper pillar as thick as a bucket on the altar, its surface covered with sharp spikes and grooves. A 7-foot-tall, slightly skinny woman was tied to a copper pillar by several dark red chains. His neck, hands, legs, and waist were all locked by black shackles. The black shackles emitted demonic chi and released a gloomy and eerie aura, immobilizing the woman. This woman was Ah Ku. She was covered in blood and her head was lowered, unconscious. Her face was covered by her messy, blood-stained hair. Many of the spikes on the copper pillar had pierced deeply into her body. There were also 2 spikes that had pierced through her thin shoulders, and a part of them was sticking out. Dark red blood constantly gushed out, dripping down the spikes and grooves on the copper pillar onto the altar. Besides this, her black robe was in tatters, torn to shreds by the whips. Her limbs and shoulders were covered with dozens of wounds so deep that bone could be seen. Blood constantly seeped out, drenching her clothes. There was no doubt that in the last 15 minutes, she had been cruelly and viciously tortured. These were only visible physical injuries. What had truly caused her to faint were the injuries to her soul. Half a month ago, she had been subjected to 50 soul lashes in the torture department. Just now, the executioner had lashed her another 50 times, severely injuring her soul and causing her to lose consciousness. In order to not expose her identity, she had not used the power of the heavenly star chain to protect her soul and had endured it. If not for this, she would not have been tortured to such a state. A black shadow stood below the altar, as well as a fiendish demon man as muscular as a bear. This person held a dark purple whip in his hand. His face was savage and terrifying, and he gave off a malicious aura. He was the deacon of the torture department, an executioner. Seeing Ling Xian enter the cell, the executioner and the black shadow simultaneously bowed and said respectfully, "Greetings, Lord Devil Saint." Ling Xian nodded slightly, indicating that the 2 could dispense with the formalities. He glanced at Ah Ku on the altar, then turned to the black shadow and asked, "Songying, what clues have you found?" Songying hurriedly extended a pair of black claws, holding out 2 dark purple communication jade slips and presenting them to Ling Xian. Lord Devil Saint, these two communication jade slips were found in Aku's spatial ring. You will immediately understand after reading the information inside. Ling Xian hurriedly took the jade slips and used his spiritual sense to read the information inside. Instantly, Ku's clear voice sounded in his mind. Brother Tianqing, the situation in North Underworld Mountain has been relatively peaceful in the past few months. The demons have not made any unusual movements. North Underworld Palace and Holy City have been rebuilt long ago. The demons have been recuperating and will probably not start another war for the next 10 years. The ancestor demon god is still recuperating and cultivating in the Blood Sea Abyss. Great Devil Saint Ling Xian and Third Devil Saint Xingtua have recovered from their injuries and are currently presiding over the situation. Without a doubt, this was the message that Ji Ku had sent to Ji Tianqing not long ago. Hearing Ji Ku's voice, Ling Xian was startled. Before he became a demon, he was from the vast divine kingdom, so he could understand the human language. After hearing the entire message in the jade slip, he immediately revealed a sinister smile. Ha ha ha, the human language, and the tone is so gentle. It's like a completely different person from the usual Aku. Brother Tianqing. How affectionate. The enemy that my clan hates the most is actually Aku's brother. This is really unexpected. Speaking of this, Ling Xian's face became malevolent, and his eyes flickered with dense anger. He could not help but curse, Ji Tianqing, O Ji Tianqing. You are really cunning and treacherous. No wonder the elites of my clan repeatedly tried to assassinate you, but they were all resolved by you and allowed you to live until today. It turns out that you actually let your sister infiltrate North Underworld Mountain as a spy, right under my nose. Ling Xian picked up the second jade slip and used his spiritual sense to read the information inside. Ji Ku's voice sounded in his mind again. Brother Tianqing, I have good news to tell you. Recently, a mysterious force has entered North Underworld Mountain and is wreaking havoc in the south. After listening patiently, Ling Xian sneered again. Chapter 2251. Ling Xian put away the two communication jade slips. His expression was ferocious and terrifying as he looked at Ji Ku with a gloomy gaze. Wake her up. I have something to ask her. The executioner hurriedly nodded and responded, then raised the dark purple long whip and lashed it on Ji Ku's body. Immediately, a chopstick-sized wound appeared on her body, and dark red blood splattered out. Unfortunately, she was unconscious and did not react even after being whipped. She did not even let out a scream. Her divine soul was already severely injured. After being whipped by the soul-punishing whip, her injuries worsened. When the executioner saw that she had not woken up, he could not help but frown. He waved his hand and shot a dazzling purple demonic light into Ji Ku's body. That demonic light contained a gust of divine soul energy. After entering Ji Ku's body, it was about to enter her divine soul. Although her divine soul was severely injured, it still remained pure. Under the protection of the heavenly star chain, it was not contaminated by the demonic qi. Now that she was unconscious, the heavenly star chain was automatically activated when the demonic light was about to erode her divine soul. Swoosh! The heavenly star chain hidden in her mind emitted sacred starlight and wrapped around her divine soul, protecting it firmly. The purple demonic light was instantly shattered by the starlight and expelled from her body. Seeing this, the executioner's expression changed. He was full of doubts. Ling Xian had been staring at Ji Ku. When he sensed the sacred energy fluctuation in her body, he immediately frowned. There is such a mighty energy fluctuation in this B***TCH's body. Does she have some powerful Dharma treasure? Ling Xian thought to himself. Ji Ku was Ji Tianqing's sister. Since she dared to infiltrate the Baiming Palace as a spy, she must have a trump card that could save her life. He quickly released his divine sense and carefully observed Ji Ku's situation. He immediately saw that there was a ball of silver light in Ji Ku's mind. It was as dazzling as a star. That ball of white light tightly wrapped around Ji Ku's mind and divine soul. It was healing the injuries to her divine soul. Ling Xian's spiritual consciousness had just touched the ball of starlight, but before he could see clearly what was going on, his spiritual consciousness bounced back. The boundless and shocking rebounding force actually shook him to the point that his expression changed drastically. He took 5 steps back with a thump 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 sound, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Ling Xian's divine sense also felt a burst of dizziness, only feeling that the sky and earth were spinning, almost falling to the ground. A moment later, his consciousness recovered, and his stumbling footsteps stabilized. He looked at Ji Ku with a face full of shock and disbelief as he shouted, "That damned bitch." There was actually such a powerful magic treasure hidden in his body. It must be a saint artifact, the most powerful saint artifact, to have such power. Ling Xian was both shocked and angry. His eyes flashed with a bright light as he quickly pondered over the problem. Zhang Ying suggested, "Master, since you're sure that Ku is a spy sent by Ji Tianqing, let's kill her. The saint artifacts and magical treasures she possesses will also belong to you." Ling Xian quickly waved his hand and sneered sinisterly, "Kill her? Ha ha ha. She's a priceless treasure now, how can I bear to kill her?" Zhang Ying was startled, not understanding what he meant. He subconsciously asked, "Master, what do you mean?" Ling Xian's face was full of pride as he sneered, "Killing her like this is too easy for this bitch. From today onwards, continue to torture her, and let her taste all the torture and pain in the world. However, we can't let her die yet, we have to keep her alive. She's Ji Tianqing's sister. I'm still waiting for Ji Tianqing to rescue her and die with her, ha 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 ha." Ling Xian laughed complacently and turned to leave the prison cell. Zhang Ying and the executioner looked at each other, suddenly understanding Ling Xian's plan. It turned out that he wanted to use Ku as bait to lure Ji Tianqing to his death. After leaving the torture department, Ling Xian was in a good mood. When he returned to the conference hall of Baiming Palace, he couldn't help but smile. And Yu had been waiting for half an hour, and his patience was running out. He closed his eyes and rested with a gloomy face. When he heard Ling Xian's footsteps, he opened his eyes and looked at him coldly. Seeing Ling Xian's smug smile, Yu was startled. He thought to himself, what happened? Why is this guy so happy? Could it be that he asked the devil race's first ancestor for permission? At this time, Ling Xian walked to his side and sat down. He said in a relaxed tone, "Master Yu, I'm really sorry for making you wait for so long. I was dealing with a small matter just now." Yu looked at him expressionlessly and said, "Cut the crap. Do you agree to my conditions or not?" Ling Xian smiled and waved his hand, "Master Yu, don't be impatient. Listen to the small matter I just dealt with first." "Humph." Yu snorted coldly. His eyes were burning with dark red flames. He was about to explode in anger. Ling Xian acted as if he didn't see it. He said slowly, "I have a blood-robed guard under my command. Her name is Ku. She came to Baiming Mountain 3 years ago. She has always been loyal to me. She is very good at figuring out my intentions. She is also very clever. Half a year ago, I promoted her to Baiming Palace and made her an internal affairs deacon." The anger in Yu's eyes grew. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and slammed his hand on the table. "Bastard! I don't have time to listen to your nonsense." Ling Xian saw that Yu was angry. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Master Yu, please calm down. I'm just explaining the situation to you. Since you don't want to listen, I'll get straight to the point. When I was discussing important matters with you, Ku hid in a secret room just a wall away and eavesdropped on our conversation. I suspected there was something wrong with Ah Ku, so I sent my subordinates to spy on her. After I caught her, I found 2 communication jade slips on her body. That's how I found out her true identity. Can you guess who she really is? Ling Xian wanted to keep Yu guessing. But when he saw Yu's angry face and eyes, he didn't dare to say more. He quickly announced the answer. She is Ji Tianqing's sister. She is a spy that Ji Tianqing planted by my side. Hearing this, Yu was stunned for a moment before his anger gradually dissipated. He frowned. Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind. He immediately came up with a plan. Oh. Ji Tianqing is so cunning. He planted a spy by your side. If that's the case, why do we have to go to Tianzhu Mountain to find him? We can use Ah Ku as bait to lure Ji Tianqing into our trap. Ling Xian laughed. Ha ha ha. Master Yu is really smart. You have the same idea as me. That's right. This is the turning point of the situation, and it is also our best chance. We just need to spread the news and set up a trap here. Then, we can wait for Ji Tianqing to come and die. Yu frowned and thought for a while. He shook his head and said, since Ji Tianqing is so cunning, he will know that this is a trap when he finds out that Ah Ku is captured. I'm afraid he won't come. Chapter 2252. Pillar of Heaven's Mountain. It was early in the morning when the sun was rising. Many disciples in white robes were practicing their swordsmanship on the training grounds. There were also many elite disciples sitting on the rooftops and eaves of the palace, meditating and absorbing the morning light and spiritual energy. But at this moment, a guard in armor flew down from the sky and landed on the training grounds as fast as lightning. He looked anxious as he ran across the training grounds and went straight to Pillar of Heaven's palace. Seeing this scene, many of the disciples who were cultivating frowned in confusion and began to discuss in secret. Wasn't that person our sect scout? Yes. That scout rushed back and went straight to Pillar of Heaven's palace. Could it be that he has important news to report? What's going on? Did something big happen again? The situation has become more and more tense in the past 6 months. I'm afraid something big has happened again. Don't make wild guesses. If something really happened, the Great Immortal and the Elders will announce it soon. Many disciples discussed for a while and then went back to practicing. At the same time, in Pillar of Heaven's palace, Huanglong Daoist studied. He was reading books and drinking tea leisurely, preparing to deal with official business. Outside the study, there was a sudden sound of hurried footsteps. A strong figure in armor rushed to the door of the study and bowed. Reporting to the Great Immortal, I have just received urgent news. I need to report it immediately. Huanglong Daoist frowned and turned to look at the scout at the door. He asked in a deep voice, what's so urgent? The scout did not dare to say much. He cupped his hands and reporting to the Great Immortal, the spy in North Underworld Mountain said that young Master Ji's sister, Miss Ah Ku, has been exposed by the Great Demon Sage. Now, the Great Demon Sage has imprisoned Miss Ah Ku in North Underworld Palace and is torturing her every day. Also, North Underworld Palace has released news that Miss Ah Ku will be publicly executed in the square 10 days later as a warning to others. Hearing this news, Huanglong Daoist spat out the tea that he had not swallowed. What? Young Master Ji's sister. Ah Ku. Huanglong Daoist didn't have time to wipe the tea off his white beard. He stared at the messenger scout with his eyes wide open. His expression was very interesting. Where did this news come from? How could young Master Ji have a younger sister? Who is that so-called Miss Ah Ku? The messenger was also bewildered by the Huanglong Daoist's question. After a moment of silence, the scout scratched his head and said with a firm tone, Great Immortal, I don't know if the news is true or false. However, this news came from Baiming Palace. Furthermore, our spies have repeatedly instructed us to send back the exact same information. Huanglong Daoist frowned and thought for a moment. He couldn't help but mutter, how could there be such a thing? This old man has never heard that young Master Ji has a younger sister. Could this be a scheme of the demon race? But isn't this scheme too clumsy? After thinking for a while, Huanglong Daoist waved his hand and ordered, you can leave now. This news shouldn't be spread. The scout didn't dare to ask any more questions. He quickly cupped his hands and bowed before leaving. Huanglong Daoist felt that this news was inexplicable. He didn't want to pay attention to it. He picked up the book on the table and flipped through it. However, after flipping through a few pages, he felt uneasy. He couldn't help but get up and leave the study room. He rushed to Ji Tianqing's residence. Whether the news is true or false, I have to report it to Master first. Perhaps this is another scheme of the demon race. With this thought, Huanglong Daoist came to the door of the secret room where Ji Tianqing was in seclusion. He waved his hand and shot out a few streaks of dazzling light into the stone door of the secret room. He began to knock on the door to wake Ji Tianqing up. At this time, Ji Tianqing was in the divine star furnace underground, casting a spell to melt the illusory spirit star nucleus. Sensing that someone was knocking on the door of the secret room, he quickly ended the spell and left the divine star furnace. After about 20 breaths, the stone door of the secret room creaked open. Ji Tianqing, dressed in a white robe, walked out of the secret room. When he saw that the person who knocked on the door was Huanglong Daoist, he asked calmly, Huanglong, what happened? Why did you knock on the door to wake me up? This. Huanglong Daoist bowed. After hesitating for a moment, he said, Master, just now a messenger came to report the news. The spy in the North Underworld Mountain sent back the news that your sister Miss Ah Ku's identity has been exposed by the Great Demon Sage. Now, the Great Demon Sage has imprisoned Miss Ah Ku in the North Underworld Palace. He is torturing her every day. Moreover, the North Underworld Palace has publicly announced that Miss Ah Ku will be executed in public in 10 days. Before Huanglong Daoist could finish his words, Ji Tianqing's face changed dramatically. His calm eyes instantly became as cold as ice. What? When did this news come? Ji Tianqing's face was full of anxiety. His eyebrows were tightly knitted. He grabbed Huanglong Daoist's shoulders with both hands and asked anxiously. Huanglong Daoist was also dumbfounded. He looked at Ji Tianqing in shock and could not help but ask, Master. Could it be, this news is true? He originally thought that when his master heard this absurd news, he would most likely sneer or laugh disdainfully. But he completely did not expect that his master would have such a reaction. Master, don't tell me you really have a sister. Huanglong Daoist still could not believe it and asked again. Ji Tianqing gradually calmed down. He suppressed the worry and anger in his heart and asked in a low voice, Huanglong, when did this happen? Huanglong Daoist was finally sure that his master really had a sister. It was that Miss Ah Ku. He secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he was cautious and reported this news to his master. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, Ji Tianqing saw that he was in a daze. He grabbed his shoulders and shook a few times and asked again. Huanglong Daoist seemed to wake up from a dream and quickly answered, Master, according to the information reported by the spies, this news came from Baiming Palace yesterday. This should have happened yesterday. Ji Tianqing frowned and murmured with a gloomy face, Cuckoo, I've been worried for a long time. With the treachery and cunning of the demon clan, they would see through your identity sooner or later. I didn't expect that this day would still come. I don't know what kind of vicious torture you will be subjected to when you are imprisoned in Baiming Palace. After saying this, he said to Huanglong Daoist with a dignified face, Huanglong, this news is temporarily confidential. Do not spread it to the public. I will leave for a few days. During this time, you must guard Tianzhu Mountain. Do not leave. Activate all the mountain protection arrays to prevent the demon clan from luring the tiger away from the mountain and taking the opportunity to attack Tianzhu Mountain. After giving the order, he got up and was about to leave. If this happened to someone else, he would not be so worried and anxious. But the person who was imprisoned and tortured was Ji Ku. She was the most sincere and selfless person to him. She was so foolish that it made his heart ache. Chapter 2253. Seeing Ji Tianqing's reaction, Huanglong Daoist knew that he wanted to go to Baiming Palace to save Kuku. He was immediately filled with anxiety and stepped forward to stop Ji Tianqing. Shizuan, you must not be impulsive. This is obviously a scheme of the demons. Baiming Palace must have deliberately released the news to lure you to rescue Miss Ku. Once you step into Baiming Palace, what awaits you will definitely be an inescapable net and a trap. Ji Tianqing stared at Huanglong Daoist with a dignified gaze and said in a low voice, Huanglong, Master is not being impulsive, but I must go. Do you know how important Kuku is to Master? In order to help Master fight against the demons, she did not hesitate to be demonized and hid in Baiming Mountain as a spy. How much danger and suffering did she endure? For Master, she can disregard everything, even her own life. Now that she is in trouble and trapped, how can Master just stand by and watch? Only then did Huanglong come to a realization. He understood the reason for the matter and was immediately at a loss for words. Get out of the way. Ji Tianqing said in a dignified tone, even if Baiming Palace is ambushed from all sides, Master must go. Don't worry, Master will not act rashly, I have made preparations and plans. Huanglong Daoist quickly shook his head and continued to persuade, Shizuan, disciple understands that you are a righteous person and do not want to let Miss Ku down, so disciple will not stop you. But if you go now, you will most likely die. How can disciple just sit by and watch? If Master insists on going, disciple will hand over the power to the elders and personally accompany Master to Baiming Palace. Even if disciple dies in Baiming Palace, disciple will accompany Master. Huanglong Daoist's tone was firm and persistent, with a bit of solemnity in the face of death. After he finished speaking, he turned to leave. Stop! Ji Tianqing shouted coldly and reached out to stop him. He said in a dignified tone, you are already so old, how can you be so reckless? Aren't you going to die? Huanglong Daoist turned his head to look at him and said helplessly, Shizuan, your seniority is higher than Huanglong's, and you are more wise and knowledgeable. Since you know that this is courting death, why are you so persistent? You! Ji Tianqing was suddenly choked by him and was speechless. Huanglong Daoist hurriedly bowed and said in a sincere tone, Master, this disciple doesn't mean to contradict you, but this disciple absolutely won't agree to this matter. This disciple will inform the elders of this matter and let everyone discuss it together. Even if you insist on going, please don't be in a hurry. At least make some preparations. With that, he turned around and slipped away, ignoring Ji Tianqing's warning. Sigh. Ji Tianqing sighed and returned to the secret room to prepare. He first went through the spatial rings and sorted out some artifacts, talismans, and jade slips that might be useful. Not long after, Huanglong Daoist led the 6 elders to the door of the secret chamber. Everyone knew the truth and unanimously objected to Ji Tianqing going to Baiming Palace. Even if Ji Tianqing didn't open the door, everyone blocked the door and tried their best to persuade him. Within Luoshui Kingdom. Luoshui Mountain. It was noon and the disciples were supposed to be cultivating in their rooms. However, a joyous event had happened yesterday. Until today, Luoshui Mountain was still lively and full of joy. This was because Luoshui Mountain's senior sister, Yun Yao, had finally completed her cultivation and successfully came out of seclusion. No one knew what kind of fortuitous encounter she had, but her strength soared and she actually broke through to the martial sage realm. She became the second martial sage in Luoshui Mountain in 300 years. At the same time, she was also the second most talented genius after Ji Tianqing. Such a shocking news shocked all the disciples, guards, and maids. Even the several thousand servants of the Luoshan Mountain knew about this matter. Even now, they were still discussing it. Not only these people, but even the attendants and elders couldn't understand what had happened to Yunyao. She had actually broken through to the martial sage realm from the tribulation stage in just a few years. On the Shinwu continent, even the most famous geniuses would need at least 100 years to accomplish such a feat. These 2 days, the Cloud Water Palace was packed with people. They were all disciples, guards, and maids of Luoshui Mountain. When everyone heard the news, they all wanted to enter the Cloud Water Palace to see the new martial sage's face and gain some good fortune. Although Yunyao had just broken through to the martial sage realm and was still meditating in the secret chamber to consolidate her martial foundation, she couldn't come out to meet the guests. However, everyone's enthusiasm didn't decrease as they surrounded the Cloud Water Palace and discussed this matter in groups of 3 to 5. You didn't see it at that time. When senior sister broke through to the martial sage realm, the sky was filled with rosy clouds and auspicious auras. It was like a god descending to the mortal world. I witnessed that heavenly anomaly with my own eyes. Moreover, the sky was filled with rosy clouds and neon lights that formed the phantom of a phoenix that spread its wings and sang. I heard from the elders that according to the strange phenomenon when senior sister broke through to the martial sage realm, she is a noble and unparalleled heavenly lady. She will definitely become a god in the future. Senior sister was originally a heavenly lady. In the future, she will inherit the mantle of the divine master and control the entire kingdom of God. Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, a white-haired figure quickly strode through the gates of Cloud Water Palace. It was a stooped old granny with a kind face and a dignified aura. Everyone was curious and doubtful as they started to discuss again. Isn't that Granny Long? Granny just visited senior sister. Why is she here again? That's strange. Granny looks a little serious. She doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Granny Long is in such a hurry to enter the Cloud Water Palace. Did something happen? Bah. Don't say such inauspicious things. Senior sister just broke through to the martial sage realm. This is a joyous occasion for the entire country. Many disciples, guards, and maids were still discussing outside the palace. Inside the Cloud Water Palace, Black Eagle led the serious-looking Granny Long quickly into Yunyao's room. She guarded the door while Granny Long walked to the corner and cast a spell to open the door to the secret room. Creak, 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 after a series of muffled sounds, the door to the secret room opened. Yunyao, dressed in a snow-white dress, was sitting cross-legged on a futon in the middle of the secret room. Her eyes were closed as she adjusted her breathing. Her expression was calm, and her aura was peaceful. However, there was an extraordinary and powerful aura surrounding her. When she heard the stone door of the secret room open, she opened her clear eyes. When she saw Granny Long walk in with a strange expression, she raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "Granny, why have you come back? Is there anything else?" Granny Long did not beat around the bush. She nodded with a serious expression and said in a serious tone, "Yunyao, Tianqing is in trouble." What? Yunyao's expression changed instantly. She asked worriedly, "Granny, what happened?" Granny Long said in a serious tone, "The spy I arranged in the North Underworld Mountain just sent back an urgent message." Chapter 2254. The sudden news stunned Yunyao for a moment. After Grandma Long finished speaking, she came back to her senses and quickly stood up. "Tianqing's sister, Miss Ah Ku. It's Ji Ku. When did she come here?" How did she sneak into Baiming Mountain and become a spy for the demon race? Yun Yao naturally knew about Ji Ku, and she was even more aware of Ji Ku's feelings for Ji Tianqing. Therefore, her state of mind was immediately in a mess, and her body and mind were filled with worry and anxiety. Her eyes, which were as clear as water, were covered with deep worry. She frowned and thought, and her lips were tightly pursed, but she didn't speak for a long time. Seeing her so worried, Grandma Long advised, Yun Yao, I know you are very worried, but I must remind you that you must dissuade Tianqing. The news that the spies heard was deliberately released by Baiming Palace. The demon race's intention is clear. They want to use Miss Ah Ku as bait to lure Tianqing to Baiming Palace to rescue her. The person they really want to deal with is Tianqing. Yun Yao nodded and said in a low voice, yes. This is no longer a conspiracy of the demon race, but an open one. They clearly want to force Tianqing to save Ji Ku, or else they will execute Ji Ku in public. Grandma Long frowned and said worriedly, you know Tianqing better than I do, so of course you know what he will choose. Even if he knows that this is a trap, he will still go to Baiming Mountain. I know that my words carry little weight, and it will be difficult for me to dissuade Tianqing. Therefore, I came to inform you as soon as I heard the news. I think you are the only one who can persuade him. Yun Yao nodded silently and said in a calm voice, we all know Tianqing's nature very well. He has always been loyal and righteous, and he will never sit by and watch Ji Ku be killed. However, even if I were to send a message to him now and dissuade him from saving them, it would be useless. What's more, Tianqing and I have both let Ji Ku down. I'm not a jealous woman, so how can I dissuade him at this time? Granny Long was an experienced person. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Yun Yao, could it be that Ah Ku isn't Tianqing's sister? Yun Yao nodded, then shook her head and explained, yes, and no. Ah Ku and Tianqing were childhood sweethearts. They grew up together and had a very deep relationship. She loved Tianqing wholeheartedly and was willing to give up everything for him, even if it meant her life. But Tianqing married me and betrayed Ah Ku's true feelings. This matter has always been hidden in my heart, and it also makes me feel deeply guilty. Granny Long came to a realization and nodded, so that's how it is. Tianqing married you, but he didn't want to let you down. So, Tianqing didn't accept Ah Ku and treated her as a sister. Ah Ku didn't complain and gave her all. Even if she was in the demon's nest, she would do her best to help Tianqing. Such a deep friendship shouldn't be let down. Granny Long sighed with complicated feelings. Her expression was also very helpless. Yun Yao nodded slightly and said firmly, since Granny also thinks so, then I can't be the bad person. Otherwise, Tianqing will regret it for the rest of his life. I'll send a message to Tianqing now. I won't dissuade him. Instead, I'll support him. Granny, I've decided to go to Tianzhu Mountain immediately. I want to fight side by side with Tianqing and go to Baiming Palace to rescue Ji Ku. What? Granny Long's expression changed drastically. She was obviously shocked. Yun Yao, are you crazy? Ah Ku loves Tianqing deeply. It's reasonable to say that she's your love rival. You know that Tianqing doesn't care about the danger and wants to rescue your love rival. You're already very magnanimous to allow him to do so. But you, not only do you support Tianqing, but you also want to die with him. Baiming Palace is the demon's nest. They'll definitely set up ambushes and traps. Do you still need me to tell you how dangerous that place is? Yun Yao shook her head. She looked at Granny Long and said firmly, Granny, I'm not crazy. I'm very clear-headed. I know that Ah Ku loves Tianqing deeply. She loves him more than anyone else in the world, even more than me. Back then, Ku had already died for Tianqing once. We can't let her sacrifice herself for Tianqing a second time. If Tianqing had awakened his memories earlier, he wouldn't have let Ah Ku down. The person he would have married would have been Ah Ku. But before he awakened his memories, I met and fell in love with him. We even got married and had a child together. We've all let Ah Ku down. This time, I'll go with Tianqing to save her. Regardless of whether we succeed or not, at least we'll be at ease. Otherwise, I'll blame myself for the rest of my life and despise myself forever. Yun Yao's tone was sincere and sincere. Every word came from the bottom of her heart. Granny Long was very emotional when she heard that. She sighed helplessly and said, "Sigh. Yun Yao, how can there be a woman like you in this world? Granny knows that you've always been gentle and kind, aloof from worldly affairs, virtuous and modest. But how can you be so stupid?" At this point, she glanced at Yun Yao's slightly bulging belly and immediately had an idea. "Yun Yao, even if you're broad-minded and want to fight side by side with Tianqing to rescue Ji Ku, you still haven't thought about what you've done. But have you thought about the children in your belly? They haven't been born yet. If anything happens to you and Tianqing, the two children will follow. At that time, will you still feel no regrets? You made the decision on your own. Have you considered your children?" Yun Yao's body trembled, and her expression froze for a moment. She slowly lowered her head and looked at her belly. She suddenly hesitated. Indeed, she could make the decision for herself. Even if she knew that she would die, she would still want to be with Ji Tianqing. However, the two children in her belly were the most precious lives. As a mother, how could she decide the life and death of her children? Just as she was hesitating, the two children in her womb suddenly moved. Immediately after, Chen Chen and Yaya's voices rang in her mind. "Mother, we support your decision. Mother, no matter whether we live or die, our family will always be together. Quickly go and meet up with father." Even though the two children's voices were very young and tender, Chinchin's words were short and her tone was firm. Yaya's thoughts were more meticulous, and her emotions were richer. At that moment, Yun Yao only felt a warm current flowing through her heart. She was filled with happiness and gratitude. Her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She couldn't help but smile and nod. "Good children, my good children. Mother and father are proud of you." Seeing this, Granny Long was very anxious, but she could no longer persuade her. After Yun Yao bowed to her, she took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message to Ji Tianqing. At the same time, she quickly packed her luggage, summoned the glazed fire dragon, and rode it out of Cloud Water Palace. Chapter 2255. Tianzhu Mountain. Huanglong Daoist and several elders were still blocking the door of Ji Tianqing's secret chamber. 4 hours had passed, but they still hadn't left. They knelt outside the secret chamber and took turns to persuade Ji Tianqing, hoping that he would give up the idea of going to Baiming Mountain. Ji Tianqing tried to chase Huanglong and the other elders away several times, but they refused to leave no matter what. Huanglong Daoist's attitude was also very firm. If Ji Tianqing insisted on going to Baiming Mountain, he had to go with him. The two sides were in a stalemate and couldn't resolve it for the time being. However, at this moment, a stream of light suddenly flew from the sky. Swoosh! The dense stream of light flew into the secret chamber and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. After the light faded away, a communication jade slip appeared. Ji Tianqing was meditating and thinking about the rescue plan. He was startled when he suddenly saw the stream of light flying over. He reached out to pick up the communication jade slip and sent his divine sense into it. Immediately, Yun Yao's voice sounded in his mind. "My husband, I suddenly heard the news today that Ah Ku's identity was exposed. I'm also very worried. My husband, please calm down and wait for a day. I will immediately come to Tianzhu Mountain to meet you and talk in detail face to face." From Yun Yao's tone, it was clear that she was worried and anxious. She had always been calm and wise. Only when she encountered an extremely important matter would she react like this. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and slowly put away the communication jade slip. He was full of doubts. What's going on? Isn't Yao Yao in seclusion in Luotian Mountain? How did she know about this? How did the news spread to Luotian Mountain? I just gave her the wind-fire divine bead not long ago. Logically speaking, she should be in seclusion to refine the divine bead. Could it be that she hurriedly came out of seclusion after hearing the news and came to discuss with me face to face? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's expression became more dignified and he became more worried. Initially, he wanted to keep it a secret and secretly head to Baiming Palace alone to rescue Ji Ku. But now, Yun Yao also knew about it and was on her way. No matter how worried he was about Ji Ku's safety, he could only give up on the idea for the time being and patiently wait for Yun Yao's arrival. After a moment of consideration, he stood up and walked out of the secret room. When the Huanglong Daoist and several elders outside the door saw him come out, they immediately surrounded him and tried to persuade him. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a solemn expression, "Everyone, there's no need to persuade me anymore. Go back and rest. My wife is about to arrive at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I will not leave. I will wait for her here." Knowing that he wouldn't be leaving for the time being, Huang Long and the other elders heaved a sigh of relief. Only then did they bow and bid farewell. However, Huang Long paid extra attention to this. He asked the two elders to stay behind and guard the door of the secret room. He couldn't help but worry. What if Shizhuan was just looking for an excuse to quietly slip away? A day and a night had passed. The two elders had been guarding the door of the secret room and hadn't left at all. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had been in the secret room the whole time. No one knew what he was fiddling with, but he didn't show his face again. Until evening, when the sun set in the west. A fiery red stream of light sped over from the south and landed on the training hall. After the fiery light dissipated, a 1,000-foot-long, golden-red glazed fire dragon appeared. A beautiful woman in a white dress flew down from the dragon's back. Seeing this, the messenger guards hurriedly rushed into the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains Palace to report the news. A moment later, the Huanglong Daoist rushed to the training hall and personally welcomed the woman in the white dress. The woman in the white dress was Yun Yao. She put away the glazed fire dragon and stood under the sword steel to wait. The Huanglong Daoist quickly walked in front of her and bowed. Disciple Huanglong greets Shimu. Yun Yao hurriedly rushed to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, thinking about Ji Ku's matter. Unexpectedly, the Huanglong Daoist's words made her frown, and her expression was slightly strange. She was only a young woman in her 20s, but the Huanglong Daoist was a white-haired senior who had lived for thousands of years. The title of Shimu sounded awkward when it came out of the Huanglong Daoist's mouth. However, Yun Yao didn't care about this. She nodded slightly to the Huanglong Daoist and ordered, "Huanglong, rise. Quickly bring me to Ji Tianqing." The Huanglong Daoist quickly led the way for her. "Shimu, please follow me." Then, he led Yun Yao through the training hall and rushed to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains Palace. They entered Ji Tianqing's room. The room was clean and elegant, but there was no one in sight. "Shimu, please wait here for a moment. I will go and invite Master over." With that, Huanglong quickly rushed to Ji Tianqing's secret room. Yun Yao stood in the middle of the room and looked around calmly. Not long after, Ji Tianqing rushed over after hearing the news. "Yao Yao, why are you here?" As soon as she entered the room, Ji Tianqing welcomed her with a worried face. He held Yun Yao's hands and looked at her from head to toe. "Aren't you cultivating in seclusion at the Luotian Mountain? How can you give up halfway? Moreover, you are pregnant now. How can you rush to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains alone? It's too dangerous." As he spoke, he pulled Yun Yao to sit at the table and poured her a cup of tea. Seeing how worried he was, Yunyao smiled and shook her head. She comforted him. Husband, you don't have to worry. I have successfully refined the wind-fire divine pearl. Just the day before yesterday, I successfully broke through to the martial sage realm and ended my seclusion. I didn't expect Granny Long to tell me the news the day after I came out of seclusion. That's why I rushed over. Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief and nodded in relief. You have finally broken through to the martial sage realm. That's great. However, what you should do now is to rest and stabilize your cultivation. It's not suitable for you to travel long distances. Yunyao held his hands and looked at him with clear eyes. She said solemnly, Husband, it would be fine if I didn't know about this. However, now that I know about this, how can I cultivate in peace? How can I sit by and do nothing? I know that Ji Ku's feelings for you are higher than the sky and deeper than the sea. For you, she was willing to go to Baiming Palace and become a spy. She was even willing to sacrifice everything. We owe her. No matter what, we have to save her. Husband, I want to go with you. As husband and wife, we will definitely be able to save Ji Ku successfully. Ji Tianqing looked at her with a complicated expression. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. He felt guilty, relieved and touched. Yao Yao, I originally wanted to go to Baiming Palace to save her without telling you and the child. I owe her too much. If I don't save her, I'm not fit to be a human. However, if I do that, I'll be letting you and the child down. I didn't expect you to understand my feelings and support my decision. Thank you. Ji Tianqing suppressed his emotions and said firmly, Ao Yao, you are pregnant and Baiming Palace is too dangerous. You can't go. I have more confidence if I go alone. I will leave tonight. You stay at Pillar of Heaven's mountains and wait patiently for my news. Chapter 2256. From the beginning to the end, Ji Tianqing had never thought of bringing Yunyao to Baiming Mountain. In fact, he had planned to hide it from Yunyao from the beginning. After all, he owed Ji Ku, but Yunyao and the two children did not. He would never let Yunyao and the children fall into a life and death situation. Even if he died in battle at Baiming Mountain, he was not willing to let Yunyao and the children get hurt. However, after hearing his words, Yunyao shook her head repeatedly and said firmly, Husband, I will never allow you to go alone. Since we are husband and wife, we should be in the same boat through thick and thin. Chen Chen and Yaya have also agreed with my decision. Our family will be together forever. Ji Tianqing fell silent and looked at Yunyao deeply. He understood Yunyao's nature and knew that she was soft on the outside but tough on the inside. Since she had made a decision, she would not change it easily. No matter how he tried to persuade her, it was useless. Since that was the case, he simply did not say anything more. Anyway, he had already expected this outcome and had made the corresponding preparations. He looked at Yunyao gently and slowly stretched out his arms to pull her into his arms and hug her tightly. Yao Yao, being able to marry you is the greatest happiness in my life. You know me, understand me, respect me, and love me. I have no regrets in this life. He seemed to be muttering to himself in a low voice and stroked Yunyao's long hair reluctantly. Yunyao leaned on his shoulder and revealed a blissful smile on her beautiful face. After a long time, the two of them separated and the warm atmosphere gradually faded. Ji Tianqing pulled Yunyao into the secret room. Yao Yao, you must be tired after rushing here. Let's meditate here for the night. We have to conserve our energy and set off early tomorrow morning. Yunyao did not doubt his words and nodded in agreement. Then, she sat cross-legged on the futon and closed her eyes to cultivate and consolidate her martial arts foundation. When she entered the state of cultivation, Ji Tianqing quietly left the secret room. After closing the door of the secret chamber, he looked at the stone door with a complicated expression and murmured to himself, Yao Yao, forgive my selfishness. I can't take you with me on this adventure. What I owe Ku, even if I have to pay it back with my life, I will have no regrets. But you and our child must live well. Nothing must happen to you." Then, he raised both of his palms and formed a hand seal. His spiritual energy poured into the door of the secret room. Suddenly, the holy formation that shrouded the secret room was activated. 2 lines of golden light appeared. A golden light barrier with a radius of 1,000 feet sealed off the entire secret chamber. Over the past day and night, he knew that Yunyao would come, so he set up this formation in the secret room. This was a top-notch saint formation with unparalleled defensive power. Other than him, there was no other martial saint who could break it. After activating the array, Ji Tianqing stood quietly outside the door for a while. Then, he turned and left. He still did not change his mind and wanted to go to Baiming Palace alone. However, before he left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, he left an order in Huanglong Daoist study. "Huanglong, you must protect the Pillar of Heaven's mountains when I am not here. Nothing must go wrong. Otherwise, I will punish you. Also, my wife, Yunyao, is cultivating in the secret chamber. You must send someone to guard outside the chamber. You must not let her leave. If I don't come back, you must obey my wife's orders and assist her wholeheartedly in managing the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. You must not disobey." There were only 3 sentences in the order, but they were strictly worded and left no room for doubt. In the dead of night, everything was silent. Ji Tianqing used the secret technique of invisibility and left the Pillar of Heaven's mountains silently. He flew to the north as fast as lightning. He had already made plans and preparations for his trip to Baiming Palace. No matter what kind of danger he faced, he was confident that he could resolve it. At the very least, he had to successfully rescue Ji Ku and come back alive. The night passed very quickly. The next morning, the sun had just risen. Yunyao, who was in the secret chamber, slowly ended her cultivation. After a night, her martial arts foundation had been consolidated and she had returned to her peak condition. However, when she opened her eyes, she realized that she was the only one in the secret chamber. Ji Tianqing was not in the secret chamber. She instinctively frowned and had a bad premonition. However, she still comforted herself in her heart. Perhaps Tianqing was busy with other things. She got up and walked to the door. She waved her hand and shot out a ray of golden light to open the door of the secret chamber. However, the ray of golden light entered the stone door. It was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no reaction. "What's going on?" she murmured in confusion. She pressed her palms on the stone door and released a surge of dermic powers to try to open the door again. However, the stone door lit up with a layer of golden light and released a majestic force that bounced her away. She was forced to take a few steps back before she could steady herself. She immediately understood the reason. Tianqing, he actually set up a sealing array to trap me in the secret chamber and left alone. Of course, she could tell that the sacred array that sealed the secret chamber was set up by Ji Tianqing. Moreover, the power of this sacred array was vast and mighty, but it would not hurt her. Other than Ji Tianqing, who else could have such an ability? Yunyao frowned and looked at the stone door. Her face was filled with anxiety and worry. She muttered to herself, "Tianqing, oh Tianqing, you know that I won't hold a grudge against you, and I won't stop you from rescuing Ji Ku. Why are you still unwilling to take me with you? From the day we got married, I swore to live and die with you. Why are you abandoning me and leaving alone?" Actually, she also knew that Ji Tianqing did this to protect her and their 2 children. In the face of danger, he would rather face it alone than drag his wife and children down with him. Yunyao was touched, but she became even more worried and anxious. At this moment, Qinshin's voice sounded in her mind. She consoled her, "Mother, Father is protecting us. He doesn't want us to take the risk. Yaya also said, Mother, Father is going to take the risk alone, but he's trapping us here. Quickly think of a way to break the array set up by Father. We'll go help him. Yunyao nodded and said calmly, All right, you two have to help Mother too. Let's work together to break the array set up by your father. With that, she formed a seal with both hands. She quickly waved her hands and formed a profound seal. She swiped her index and middle fingers in front of her eyes. Immediately, her eyes turned icy blue and lit up with a deep brilliance. When she looked at the secret chamber's stone door and walls again, she saw that the scene had changed. Thousands of golden lines and veins appeared. She observed with rapt attention. Her brain also worked quickly calculating and deducing the lines and veins of the array. At the same time, in the Huanglong Daoist study. He had just entered the study and was about to deal with official business when he found a jade slip on the desk. He picked up the jade slip and used his divine sense to read the information inside. Immediately, Ji Tianqing's dignified voice sounded in his mind. After a few breaths, he heard Ji Tianqing's order and his expression changed drastically. Chapter 2257. Huanglong Daoist originally thought that his master's wife, Yunyao, would definitely be able to dissuade his master. But he did not expect that his master would still go to Baiming Palace alone. Even his wife, Yunyao, was trapped in the secret chamber. He finally understood that his master had made up his mind, and it was useless no matter who tried to persuade him. Moreover, the last sentence of his master's order seemed to be his last words. This made his heart extremely heavy, and a thick layer of haze covered it. But things had already come to this, and he was powerless to change anything. The only thing he could do was to follow his master's order and guard the door of the secret chamber, and never let his master's wife leave. At the same time, he would do his best to protect Tianzhu Mountain. He sat cross-legged outside the secret chamber, closed his eyes, and meditated, trying to calm his mind. But not long after, he sensed a strong energy fluctuation in the secret chamber. He opened his eyes and saw that the walls of the secret chamber were shining with a golden brilliance. It was obvious that the defensive array had been activated. Seeing this scene, Huanglong Daoist immediately understood. With Master's intelligence, she must have discovered that Master sneaked away and set up a sealing array in the secret chamber. She is most likely trying to break the array. Unfortunately, who can break the sacred array set up by Master himself? Huanglong Daoist muttered to himself, pretending that nothing had happened, and continued to close his eyes and rest outside the door. At the same time, in the secret chamber, Yunyao stood in the middle of the secret chamber, waving her palms with a solemn expression, and constantly forming array seals. She released a colorful brilliance and injected it into the surrounding walls, trying to break the array. For a full 4 hours, she did not stop casting the spell for a single moment, never once stopping. She formed tens of thousands of array seals and made hundreds of attempts. However, the result was no exception. The array seals she released were all swallowed by the array, and it did not cause much of a reaction. Fortunately, after so many attempts, the array had undergone many changes, and she had a deeper understanding of arrays. She temporarily stopped casting and stared at the array, frowning as she pondered. Although the structure and veins of this array are somewhat similar to the 3-origin fire array and the 9 stars return to dust array. However, I have tried over 100 times but to no avail. I am unable to unlock the meridians. Could it be that I'm going in the wrong direction? The saint formation set up by Tianqing has nothing to do with those 2 formations. Her brain was working at high speed, deducing and calculating the structure of the array. At this moment, Yaya comforted her considerately, "Mother, don't worry. Father is a 1 in a million genius, and is now the strongest person below the martial god." The saint array that he had personally set up was, of course, incomparably marvelous and unfathomable. However, Father used this formation to trap you, but he didn't want you to suffer any harm. You can think about what kind of formation it is based on this point. Yun Yao's eyes lit up when she heard Yaya's reminder. She felt enlightened all of a sudden. Yeah. Yaya was still the smartest. Mother only wanted to observe the structure of the array and guess what kind of array it was, but she forgot about this point. Your father is very meticulous. Since he doesn't want to hurt us, this array formation doesn't have any offensive capabilities. This kind of formation that was only used for sealing and posed no threat was extremely rare. I have to think about it carefully. Perhaps I can find the answer. Yun Yao revealed a gratified smile. She began to search through her memories for saint-level formations that met this condition. Soon, Chen, who had been silent all this time, seemed to have thought of something. He transmitted his voice to Yun Yao through his soul. Mother, when you were trying to break the array just now, Chen was observing the array's reaction and changes. Chen thought for a long time and roughly guessed that the array that father had set up could be the 9-heaven star array or the ultimate crimson golden star array. When father taught me the 9 heavens cloud dragon technique and taught Yaya the infinite stars technique, these two types of saint formations were included. Yun Yao's eyes lit up when she heard this. 9 heaven star array. Ultimate crimson golden star array. I don't seem to have heard of these two formations in my memories. Chen, according to your judgment, what kind of formation is this? Chen considered for a moment, then said with certainty, according to my judgment, it should be the ultimate crimson golden star array. If it's the 9 heaven star array, it will have 9 main meridians that gather the power of more than 300 stars. The brilliance of the stars is silvery white, while this great formation is dark gold. Therefore, the most likely possibility is the ultimate crimson golden star array. Yun Yao could not help but nod when she heard his explanation. She asked, Chen, then do you know how to break the array? Chen was silent for a moment, then explained, Mother, Chen has been focusing on cultivating the 9 heavens cloud dragon technique. Even if I were to study the array, it would be useless. Therefore, I did not waste my time on it. The light in Yun Yao's eyes dimmed. She was a little disappointed. However, Chen continued, Mother, don't be anxious. Chen will study the array now and try to master the ultimate crimson golden star array in the shortest time possible. Yun Yao's heart reignited with a glimmer of hope. She asked tentatively, Chen, how long will you need? Is there enough time? Chen did not give a definite answer. He only said, Mother, don't worry. Chen will do his best. After that, he went silent. Clearly, he had gone to study the array. Yun Yao could only wait patiently. She took the opportunity to meditate and recover her magic power. Before she knew it, 24 hours had passed. Yun Yao meditated for an entire day. Her magic power had recovered to its peak. At this moment, Chen's voice suddenly sounded in her mind. His tone was filled with joy and pride. Mother, Chen has finished studying. I've basically mastered the ultimate crimson golden star array. Yun Yao was stunned when she heard this news. She said in disbelief, What? So fast? It's only been a day. She could not believe that her son was so monstrous. He had only used 24 hours to master a top-notch holy formation. If Chen's words were true, the world would be shocked and this news spread throughout the continent. Countless people would be so shocked that their eyeballs would pop out. Chen was neither proud nor did he want to waste time. He said calmly, Mother, there's no time to lose. Do as I say now. We'll try our best. Yun Yao calmed herself down and nodded hurriedly. All right. Mother believes in you. Chen said solemnly, Step on the center of the palace with your left foot. Raise your head and look at the sky. Hold the 3-foot sword in your right hand. Point it all at Mount Zhen. Although his voice was still very young, his tone was solemn. He chanted the incantation methodically. It was rather imposing. Yun Yao did not hesitate. She followed his instructions. She stepped on the center of the palace and 9 leaps. She formed the incantation with both hands and began trying to break the array. She shot out several streaks of magic power light one after another, hitting specific locations. Her footwork also changed accordingly. The array that enveloped the secret room immediately reacted. Thousands of meridians appeared, shining with golden light. Chapter 2258. The facts proved that Qinchin's deduction was correct. The sacred formation that enveloped the secret chamber was the ultimate crimson golden star formation. However, Ji Tianqing had added some changes to it. However, this did not affect the main structure of the formation. Under Qinchin's guidance, Yun Yao stepped on the stars and clenched her fingers together. She continuously cast spells, producing dazzling radiance. She did not stop for a full 6 hours. In total, she formed more than 10,000 seals. It was impossible for an ordinary martial saint to memorize such a complicated method to break the formation in one go, much less execute it smoothly. However, Qinchin did it. She memorized the steps and sequence to break the formation without making any mistakes. Yun Yao did it too. She followed Qinchin's guidance and formed the seals without missing a step. Both mother and son were peerless geniuses that only appeared once in 1,000 years. Finally, 6 hours passed. Yun Yao finished casting and successfully broke the ultimate crimson golden star formation. At that moment, the golden light barrier that enveloped the secret chamber released a dazzling light. Then, the golden light quickly retracted into the wall. The entire formation also closed. Yun Yao watched the formation close with her own eyes. She revealed a gratified expression and said proudly in her heart, "Qinchin, how can you be so monstrous? Even if there are countless geniuses in the world, compared to you, they are like fireflies to the moon. They can't be compared." Yaya was also very excited. She said excitedly, "Brother is simply too powerful. I'm afraid that other than father and mother, no one can compare to brother's talent." Qinchin received such praise, but she was neither arrogant nor impatient. She said calmly, "Mother, you've been casting spells continuously for a few hours. Your magic power must be depleted. You should recover your magic power first. Then, we'll go look for father." Yun Yao thought for a moment and shook her head. "No, your father has already left for a day and a half. I have to hurry over at my fastest speed to find him. I still need 2 days on the way. It's enough for me to recover my magic power." Then, she waved her hands and sent out 2 rays of blue light into the secret chamber's stone door. With a muffled creak 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 sound, the stone door slowly opened. Yun Yao hurriedly stepped out of the secret chamber. However, as soon as she reached the door of the secret room, she was stopped by a white-haired old man who wore an apricot-yellow Taoist robe and held a horsetail whisk. This person was the Huanglong Daoist who was guarding outside the door. For the past 1.5 days, he had been standing guard outside the door, not taking a single step out. In the past few hours, not only did he feel the energy fluctuations in the secret room, but he also saw the array light up with golden light. He knew that Yun Yao had never given up on cracking the array. However, he knew that it was impossible for Yun Yao to break the formation set up by Ji Tianqing. At this moment, he was dumbfounded when he saw Yun Yao open the door of the secret chamber and appear at the door. "Mistress! You actually broke Master's array? How is this possible?" Huanglong Daoist couldn't believe his eyes. He stared at Yun Yao, dumbfounded. Yun Yao frowned and looked at him, asking, "Huanglong, why are you here? Have you been guarding outside the secret chamber all this time?" Huanglong Daoist came back to his senses and didn't dare to hide anything. He hurriedly explained, "Mistress, that's right. This disciple was ordered by Master to guard here. Yunyao nodded to show that she understood. She said in a dignified tone, Huanglong, get out of the way. I'm going to find Tianqing. I can't let him take the risk alone. Huanglong Daoist refused to back down. He persuaded her earnestly, Mistress, with your talent and wisdom, of course you can understand that Master did this with good intentions. He would rather take the risk himself and die than be a burden to you and your child. Now that you've cracked the array, if you really go to Baiming Mountain, wouldn't his painstaking efforts be in vain? Before Master left, he left a decree for this disciple. Please forgive me, Mistress. This disciple will never allow you to leave. Yunyao saw that his attitude was firm and that he would not back down. She said in a low voice, Huanglong, if you can understand Tianqing's feelings, you can also understand my worries. Don't worry, I won't do anything I'm not confident in, and I definitely won't watch as Tianqing fights alone. I'll send a message to God Lord Luoshui right now and ask her to help me save Tianqing. Huanglong Daoist was taken aback by these words. Soon after, he revealed a look of pleasant surprise and nodded repeatedly. Right. That's right. Mistress, you're the most considerate. Only God Lord Luoshui can break into Baiming Palace and save Master and Miss Ah Ku. You're the eldest senior sister of Luoshui Mountain, the future overlord of Luoshui Divine Kingdom. Only you can ask martial god Luoshui for help. In truth, Huanglong Daoist had long since thought that only a martial god expert could guarantee the safety of Ji Tianqing and Ah Ku. However, his words carried little weight, and he had no friendship with martial god Luoshui, much less contact him. He could only dispel this thought. Since Yunyao had spoken, he naturally agreed wholeheartedly. Yunyao didn't waste any time. She hurriedly took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message to martial god Luoshui. Then, she said to Huanglong Daoist, I've already sent a message to ask God Lord Luoshui for help. You can rest assured now, right? Huanglong Daoist nodded and bowed gratefully. Many thanks, Mistress. If God Lord Luoshui appears and successfully saves Master and Miss Ah Ku, Pillar of Heaven's Mountain will forever remember this kindness. With that, he no longer stopped Yunyao and took the initiative to retreat to the side. Yunyao gave him a few words of advice before quickly leaving Pillar of Heaven's palace. Arriving at the training ground, she summoned the glass fire dragon and rushed to the north as fast as lightning. Huanglong Daoist stood in place and watched the glass fire dragon disappear into the horizon. He prayed in his heart, I hope Master, Mistress, and Miss Ah Ku can return safely. Dark North Mountain, near the Holy City. It was late at night. The sky was as dark as ink, and cold winds howled in the night sky. The newly constructed Holy City was as majestic and dignified as ever. However, there were only around 1 million demons in the Holy City. It was no longer as prosperous as before. In the past, the city would have been filled with lights, but now, it was dark and desolate. Whoosh! An invisible black silhouette tore through the night sky and flew above the Holy City, stopping in the midst of a demonic cloud. This black silhouette was none other than the invisible Ji Tianqing. After 2 days of traveling at full speed, he had finally arrived at the demon race's holy city from Pillar of Heaven's Mountain. 1,000 li to the north, across a brown wasteland, he would reach the Divine Mountain. The summit of the Divine Mountain was his goal, Dark North Palace. However, he had long since made preparations and plans. He would not rashly charge into Dark North Palace. He hid in the night sky and observed the holy city from above, quietly waiting for an hour. Only when a group of black-armored demon guards emerged from the city lord's mansion did he begin to move. Whoosh! Chapter 2259. Ji Ku had once mentioned something to Ji Tianqing. After Baiming Palace was rebuilt, it was still lacking many things. There were cultivation resources, as well as various miscellaneous items. In the next few months, the things that were lacking would have to be gradually replenished. Thus, every 2 or 3 days, Baiming Palace would send a group of guards to the holy city. The city lord's mansion would prepare the things that Baiming Palace lacked in advance, and the guards would bring them back. As the steward of internal affairs, Ji Ku was well aware of this matter. In the past, Ji Tianqing had not taken this matter to heart. Only after Ji Ku's incident and when he was considering a plan of action did he remember this matter. The group of demon race guards were all members of Baiming Palace. They possessed identity tokens and could enter Baiming Palace at will. Thus, they became Ji Tianqing's targets. This group of guards had a total of 18 people. They all wore cold black metal armor and heavy helmets, revealing only their purple or dark red eyes. After they left the city lord's mansion, they silently flew into the night sky and leisurely rushed back to Baiming Palace. Ji Tianqing silently followed behind them, maintaining a distance of 100 meters so that he was not discovered. After 100 breaths of time, the demon race guards were flying above a mountain range. The night was pitch black, and the dense devil qi and black clouds obscured them from view. At this moment, Ji Tianqing finally made his move. Using the Armillary Heaven's secret art, he controlled the power of the world and transformed it into a giant invisible hand that instantly captured a guard. This guard walked at the very back of the group, looking completely unconcerned. It was obvious that he had carried out this mission many times and had always been safe, so he was not vigilant. But he did not expect that death would descend upon him without any warning. The giant invisible hand firmly restrained him, making him unable to move or even make a sound. Then, an invisible spike formed from spiritual energy viciously pierced his spiritual energy. He was killed on the spot without making a single sound. Even at the moment of his death, he did not know what had happened, nor did he know who the murderer was. After Ji Tianqing killed the black-armored guard, his divine soul left his body and entered this person's body. As for his real body, he had placed it in the sword world, safe and sound. Next, Ji Tianqing would be in charge of controlling the body of the demon clan guard. On the surface, this person did not seem to have changed at all. But in reality, his soul had already been replaced by Ji Tianqing. From the moment Ji Tianqing made his move to the moment he completed the possession, it was only a matter of a blink of an eye. The dozen or so guards at the front of the group did not notice anything amiss. They maintained a steady speed and flew towards Baiming Palace. Ji Tianqing adapted to his new body and sped up to catch up. Nothing was said along the way. Half an hour later, the 18 guards returned to Baiming Palace. They first went to the Internal Affairs Hall and took out various resources and miscellaneous items from their spatial rings and handed them to the Internal Affairs Manager. After completing the mission, everyone left the Internal Affairs Palace and returned to their respective residences. Ji Tianqing was thinking about where to find Ji Ku's whereabouts. At this time, a black-armored guard came up and patted his shoulder familiarly. He smiled lightly and said, "Ah man, come to my place for a drink. Tonight at the city lord's mansion, Captain, you gave me a bottle of good wine. Drinking it can strengthen my qi and blood and increase my cultivation for several years." Only now did Ji Tianqing know that this body was called a man. Okay. He nodded without hesitation and replied. He spoke in the demon language. In order not to expose his identity, his words were very short. The black-armored guard did not suspect anything. He brought him into Baiming Palace and to a room in the backyard. This room only had 2 rooms. The bedroom inside and the living room outside. The area was not big. There was also a secret room underground used for meditation and cultivation. The black-armored guard pulled Ji Tianqing to a seat in the living room. He took out a bottle of wine and a few dishes from his spatial ring and began to eat and drink with Ji Tianqing. The wine was the demon race's common strong blood wine. The dishes were made from demon beast meat. It was rough and fishy, making it hard to swallow. But Ji Tianqing did not want to reveal anything. He could only drink and eat as if nothing had happened. He rarely took the initiative to speak. The black-armored guard saw that he was silent and comforted him straightforwardly. "Ah man, why aren't you saying anything? Are you still angry about that matter? Get over it. Although we are the guards of Baiming Palace, we are still lowly servants. The manager can scold or hit us as he wishes. As long as you listen to brother, you will have a share of my benefits in the future." Ji Tianqing then knew that this person was called Pu Cheng. He had been in Baiming Palace for several years. As for the matter between Ah Man and Pu Cheng, he had no interest in knowing. He was a man of few words but kept urging Pu Cheng to drink. In 15 minutes, Pu Cheng had drunk more than half of the flask of strong blood wine. He was so drunk he could not think clearly. But he was like many people. The more drunk he was, the more he spoke. He did not even think before he spoke. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing kept probing Pu Cheng, trying to find out more information. "I heard that our internal affairs deacon is a human female impersonating. Isn't that so?" Pu Cheng hugged the flask of wine and said with drunken eyes, "She hit it really well." But she still could not escape the great Mo Saint's eyes. Ji Tianqing continued to ask, "In a few days, she will be executed. Who will be in charge of watching over her?" Pu Cheng hugged the flask of wine and drank a few mouthfuls of the dark red blood wine. He said unclearly, "In any case, there are those bastards from the torture department. It has nothing to do with us. Let me tell you, ah man, this is a fight between immortals. We are just small fries, we should not interfere." Torture department. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and had a plan in mind. Pu Cheng lay drunk on the table and said with a smile with his eyes closed, "What is it? Are you thinking of being whipped by the executioner last month? Be careful in the future. That torture department is hell. If you go in, even if you don't die, you will lose half your life." Ji Tianqing no longer paid any attention to him. He stretched out his hand and shot out a formless soul power that struck his divine soul. Pu Cheng immediately fell into a deep sleep and quieted down. Ji Tianqing quietly left and flew out of Baiming Palace. He looked around for the location of the torture department. The torture department was at the cliff behind Baiming Palace. It was shaped like a skull and was very eerie and eye-catching. After Ji Tianqing found the torture department, he hid in the shadows and observed for a long time. However, there were large numbers of guards inside and outside the torture department. There were also many saint-level formations. The defense was very tight. He even faintly felt that there were a few faint powerful consciousness shrouding the torture department. He immediately guessed that Ji Ku was imprisoned in the torture department. The martial saints of the Mo race were watching the movements of the torture department to prevent him from breaking out of the prison. If he rashly appeared or acted, he would definitely be surrounded and attacked. The present torture department looked calm on the surface, but in reality, it had already set up an inescapable net. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.